Human beings are the most intelligent creation on this planet and also the most complicated. We can build machines. We can build cities. We can design the future. But when it comes to our own emotions, our relationships, and our behavior, we often fail to understand ourselves. Have you ever wondered why people become jealous for no reason at all? Why people change the moment they gain power? Why we sometimes make decisions we end up regretting? Regret happens, but here's the truth. Human nature isn't random. It has patterns. It has its own set of rules. And the person who understands those rules becomes a better person for themselves and for everyone around them. This is the laws of human nature, a journey that will teach you to see behavior clearly. It's not about controlling other people. It's about understanding them and understanding yourself first. In this audiobook, you'll discover how ego, envy, and insecurity shape our choices. You'll learn why emotions are often more powerful than logic, and how awareness can protect you from manipulation and emotional traps. Think of this audiobook as a mirror, sometimes uncomfortable, but always honest. You're listening to The Laws of Human Nature, brought to you by Wayyal. Put on your headphones and get ready for the most powerful journey into understanding humanity. Let's begin. Have you ever noticed how your brain can be so sharp, so capable, and yet you still make careless decisions over the smallest things? Decisions you don't even understand until later. You're rational, you're educated, you're experienced, and yet the tone of a text message, the silence in a room, or the half-smile on a colleague's face is enough to shift something inside you. Today we're going to explore our first and most fundamental law, the law of irrationality. This law reminds you that humans like to believe they think logically, but in truth, we're often steered by our emotions. The danger isn't that you feel things, the danger is that you react based on those feelings, and then justify it afterward by telling yourself, "I was just being honest." Irrationality doesn't mean you're crazy. It means your feelings can quietly take the wheel while your thinking mind rides along as a passenger. Emotion shows you a version of events, and your mind builds a story that seems to prove it's true. Anger convinces you that you've been disrespected. Fear convinces you there's danger. Insecurity convinces you that you're being rejected. Ego convinces you that you're being disregarded. Then you react quickly, sharply, and a short silence follows, a flicker of regret. And then your brain performs its favorite trick. I wasn't wrong. That's just how the situation was. So what's really driving human behavior? Your brain operates at two speeds. There's a slow system that thinks patiently, checks the details, and understands context. And there's a fast system that judges instantly, slaps on a label, and pushes you toward action. That fast system runs on emotion. When you're emotionally charged, your mind starts hunting for patterns and evidence, not to find the truth, but to prove that your feelings are correct. So when you're hurt, old wounds resurface. When you're jealous, someone else's success suddenly looks suspicious. When you're insecure, even silence feels like a threat. Your brain becomes an internal lawyer, not a judge. It builds a case. It argues. It cherry-picks the evidence that supports the verdict it already wants, and you mistake that argument for your own honest thinking. Picture this: you're at the office. You've spent weeks on a project and presentation day finally arrives. Your manager mentions the work in the meeting but never says your name, just one quick, casual line. The rest of the team smiles. You should be smiling too, but there's a small spike of something inside you. They took my credit. Now several things are possible. Maybe it was intentional. Maybe your manager was rushed and simply forgot. Maybe they assumed everyone already knew it was your work, but your emotions are tangled up with your ego and your mind picks the darkest story available. So you draft an email. Subject line, just a quick clarification. Polite words but a hidden edge underneath. You hit send. The next day your manager is confused. The relationship feels a little strained and you feel even more tense because now your mind whispers, "See, their awkward reaction proves I was right." But the truth is, the manager wasn't the real problem. Your own impulse was. That impulse gave you instant certainty. The law of irrationality doesn't say your hurt wasn't real. It says the hurt can be genuine while the conclusion you drew from it is wrong. Or picture this, you send your partner a simple, ordinary message. "Are you free today?" Hours pass with no reply. Your mood starts to shift. First a thought, they must be busy. Then an emotion arrives, uncertainty. Then a thought that supports that emotion, they're avoiding me. Then something stronger, they don't care. So you send another message, a little sarcastic, just one line but with a sharp edge to it. "Okay, cool." Your partner finally replies, "Sorry, I was in a meeting." But your mind has already built the battlefield, so their explanation doesn't bring relief, it sounds suspicious instead. And then the argument begins. But this argument was never really about words. It was about an old internal fear: I could be ignored. That's what irrationality does. It paints the present moment with the colors of past insecurity. You think you're fighting the person in front of you, but you're actually fighting your own emotional memory. Here's a modern scenario. You're scrolling through social media. An influencer posts about their perfect body, their perfect vacation, their perfect partner, their perfect life. You're just looking, but there's a tiny pinch inside you. Then another, then a wave of it. You tell yourself, "I'm not bothered by this," but you keep scrolling faster and your mood turns a little bitter. Then you see someone else's comment and it strikes you as unkind. A friend's success post starts to feel like showing off. A relative's opinion suddenly seems stupid. What's actually happening? Often your irritation has nothing to do with those people. It's your own comparison-driven insecurity leaking out. This is the law of irrationality at work. You rarely admit that you feel insecure. Instead, that insecurity puts on a mask. It becomes judgment. It becomes sarcasm. It becomes moral superiority. And you convince yourself you're simply being honest. So how do you deal with this? Pause. When you ignore this law, you lose three things. First, timing. You react at exactly the wrong moment. Second, accuracy. While you're busy managing your feelings, you lose sight of the facts. Third, connection. You become so wrapped up in defending your own story that you never bother to understand anyone else's. This creates a pattern in relationships. You get hurt, you react. The other person becomes defensive. You get hurt even more and you react even more strongly. This spiral feels like a chase for truth, but it's really just a loop of emotional intensity feeding itself. At work, you tell yourself you're demanding respect, but really you're just discharging anxiety. In a relationship, you tell yourself you're demanding clarity, but really you're trying to soothe your own fear. Online, you tell yourself you're pursuing justice, but really you're feeding your ego. The law of irrationality holds up an uncomfortable mirror. Sometimes your enemy isn't the person standing in front of you. Your enemy is your own urgency. Have you ever had this experience? You say something in anger and 10 minutes later you wonder, "Why did I say that?" That calmer person, 10 minutes later, is also you. It's just that by then your nervous system has settled. Your oxygen levels are back to normal, your heart rate has slowed, and your brain has switched back into its steady, deliberate mode. This law offers you a powerful insight. You are not a single, fixed person. You're more like shifting weather. Sometimes sunny, sometimes stormy, sometimes foggy. And when it's foggy, you naturally drive slower. But in life, when emotional fog rolls in, we often do the opposite. We speed up. We tell ourselves, "I have to decide right now. I have to reply right now. I have to prove myself right now." That urgency is the signature of irrationality. Here's a small, relatable story. Imagine you're on a crowded commuter train. The rush of people pushes in from the side. You're tired, your bag is heavy on your shoulder, your phone battery is dying. Someone gives you a shove. On a normal day, you'd shrug it off. But today you're already carrying stress from work, tension at home, and too little sleep. The shove is small. Your reaction is big. You spin around and snap. "Can't you see where you're going?" The other person, already tense themselves, snaps right back. Suddenly, it's not about the shove on the train anymore. It's your ego taking a hit with people watching. You think, "If I stay quiet now, I'll look weak." And just like that, a minor physical bump turns into a full-blown social confrontation. Later at home, you think, it was just a crowded train. Why did I get so angry? The answer is simple but revealing. You weren't reacting to that moment. You were already loaded, and all it took was a small spark. The gunpowder was already there. The law of irrationality explains this clearly. Triggers don't create your emotions. They simply expose emotions that were already sitting underneath the surface. This is where reflection matters more than advice. Whenever you feel a strong sense of certainty, they're definitely disrespecting me, they're definitely ignoring me, everyone is against me, I'm right, pause for 1 second and ask yourself, is this clarity or is this just the volume of my emotion? Because real clarity tends to be quiet. Loudness is usually emotional. Awareness works differently from suppression. You still react, but you notice the reaction. And once you notice it, the reaction stops dragging you along. It becomes a wave that can rise and pass, instead of a current that pulls you under. The law of irrationality isn't here to make you perfect. It's here to make you honest. You have to accept that your emotions can mislead you, and once you accept that, it might feel a little frightening at first, because you start seeing your own life more clearly. And once you see it clearly, your next decision, your next word, your next silence, all carry new weight. That closes our first episode. Now let's move to episode 2. The law of narcissism transforms self-love into empathy. Have you ever noticed how, in a room full of people, the attention always seems to circle back to just one person? Sometimes that person is you. Sometimes it's someone else. And the strangest part is that narcissism rarely feels like a mirror. It feels like a spotlight, a light that makes everything it touches suddenly seem important. Today's law might sound simple, but it runs deep. The law of narcissism tells you that human beings naturally place themselves at the center of their own story. We think our voice is louder, our story more real, and we listen mainly to ourselves. When you're not truly understanding others but simply using them as an audience for your own narrative, narcissism is quietly at work. In its own terms, narcissism isn't just aggression. It's not always the "I'm the best" energy people picture. Sometimes narcissism sounds like, "I'll only feel safe if you constantly reassure me." Sometimes it sounds like, "I can't tolerate even the slightest bit of being ignored." Sometimes it sounds like, "I won't consider your feelings unless they align with my own comfort." At the core of this law is a simple truth. Self-focus is natural. The problem starts when self-focus becomes your default lens, when your mind narrows and every relationship turns into a mirror you're using to check your own reflection. So what drives this behavior? There's a quiet hunger inside every human being. I matter. That hunger isn't a flaw, it's human. The trouble begins when that hunger grows so intense it becomes a bottomless well that never fully fills. You feel a rush from attention, then it fades and you return to baseline. Then you crave more. You feel warm from someone's praise, then it cools and you crave more. There's an emptiness inside, and you try to fill it by turning people into suppliers of likes, compliments, approval, replies, invitations, and priority. This is the hidden face of narcissism. It doesn't make you powerful, it makes you dependent on other people's reactions. That's the strange thing about narcissism. On the outside, it can look like confidence, but underneath, it's fragile. A little criticism and the mood collapses. A little neglect and rage flares up. A little competition and insecurity floods in. There are two broad types. Some people display loud, grandiose narcissism. Their energy says, "I'm the best. Without me, nothing works." Their words are sharp, their presence heavy. Other people display a quieter, more vulnerable form of narcissism. Their energy says, "Treat me carefully. I'm the one who's hurting." Their drama is silent, but the gravitational pull is exactly the same. Both types share the same center of gravity. The only difference is the packaging. What matters isn't labeling someone one type or the other. What matters is recognizing the underlying lens. Is my attention stuck only on myself? Here's a modern scenario, a team meeting. You came up with an idea, the team worked hard on it, and the results were strong. Your manager says, Great execution, team, and everyone claps. Somewhere inside you, a small heat rises. It was my idea. Why wasn't my name mentioned? That feeling can be entirely valid. Credit matters, recognition matters. But here's where narcissism twists things. Your mind turns recognition into proof of respect, and respect into proof of your own worth. Then a sentence runs through your head. If they don't say my name, it means I'm invisible. And you can't tolerate that feeling of invisibility, so you take control. You steer the conversation, drop subtle reminders, downplay a colleague's contribution, anything to keep the spotlight on yourself. The team's vibe changes. People start appreciating your talent a little less, and the constant need for validation leaves you more exhausted and, ironically, more alone. This is the quiet tragedy of narcissism. It demands appreciation, but its behavior tends to repel it. Or here's a relationship scenario. You're sitting with your partner. They share something. I had a strange day at work. I felt like everyone was judging me. You say, yeah, but your mind is already jumping to your own story. You interrupt, same thing happened to me. And you spend the next 10 minutes describing your own experience. Your partner goes quiet. You think, I was just relating to them. But inside they're thinking, I don't feel heard. Narcissism wasn't loud here, it was soft. It simply used their story as an entry point onto your own stage. When this repeats over time, an invisible loneliness builds inside the relationship, two people together, but one of them feels alone. Neglect quietly becomes suffering. You're present physically, but you're not offering real presence. Here's another modern scenario, the social media validation loop. At night, you take a photo and post it, simple caption. You check your phone after 5 minutes, then 10, then 20. Likes bring relief. No likes bring tension. You tell yourself you're just posting for fun, but your body proves that alongside the fun, there's also hunger. Then you look at other people's posts. They get more likes, and suddenly a toxic thought creeps in. Their attention makes them special. My attention determines my value. Now you compare, then you judge, then you disconnect. Then you either overpost or become bitter. This is the modern form of narcissism. The remote control of your self-worth ends up in the hands of the public. And when that remote isn't in your own hands, your mood isn't either. When narcissism is active in conflict, you miss 3 things. First, context. You interpret everything through your own lens and accept that interpretation as the truth, when really it's just one person's inner world and you've mistaken it for objective fact. Second, other people's efforts. While you're busy resisting or resenting something, they're carrying the weight of their own lives. Third, long-term impact. You choose short-term comfort, attention, control, the feeling of winning over long-term trust, and then you complain that people aren't being genuine with you. But sometimes people aren't genuine because you never gave them space to be. You've assigned them a role. Reassure me, praise me, choose me. And when they don't perform that role perfectly, you feel disappointed, then you turn cold, then you punish them with silence, sarcasm, and distance. That punishment feels powerful to you, but it's actually the language of fear, fear of not mattering. Here's a small everyday scene. Your friend calls you. Hey, there's something going on in my family, I'm feeling pretty low. You're only half listening because you already have your response ready. I'm busy too, my life is hard too, everyone has problems, you're overthinking it. The call ends and you feel back to normal, but your friend's mood grows heavier. Later, they wonder, why don't people open up to me? Narcissism's honest answer is, because you're not offering a safe space. You're treating their story as an inconvenience. This isn't blame, it's awareness. You're not a bad person. You're just stuck in your own center. Narcissism often comes not from childhood wounds, but from a universal human need. Notice me, understand me, accept me. When that need goes unmet, a person tends to choose one of 2 extremes. Either they make themselves look impressive so nobody can ignore them, or they present themselves as a victim so nobody will leave. Both strategies chase the same thing, attention, but at a cost. You lose real connection because connection is built on mutual seeing. I see you, you see me. Narcissism replaces that with a one-sided view, where the other person becomes background scenery in your own story. Consider a deeper workplace pattern. I'm the one doing everything. Maybe you genuinely are responsible and reliable, but narcissism can turn that responsibility into identity. I'm the only competent one here. That identity feels sweet. It brings a sense of superiority, but it also carries bitterness. You reject help, you get exhausted, and then you complain that nobody supports you, without realizing you never made room for support because you fell in love with the image of being indispensable. The real source of suffering here isn't the workload, it's addiction to that self-image. And in relationships, there's a deeper version too. I'm special. Sometimes you mistake love for specialness. Make me a priority, reply to me instantly, the rules should be different for me. When reality doesn't match that fantasy, you get hurt and you turn that hurt into an accusation. You don't care. But proof of caring isn't instant availability. Proof of caring is understanding. Narcissism compresses that understanding down to a single formula. What I feel is the truth. Your feelings become the constitution of the relationship, and whoever breaks that constitution becomes guilty. This can leave a partner walking on eggshells, afraid to speak, afraid to be busy, afraid to simply be human. And you become more insecure too, because now everything around you starts to feel artificial. There's a quieter signal that reveals narcissism. You interpret every situation as being about you. Someone's in a bad mood, you think it's because of you. Someone succeeds, you think you now have to compete. Someone holds a different opinion, you think they're attacking you. Sometimes you really are the center of the situation. Often, you're not. But your mind wants to keep you centered because being centered feels like control. Real control comes only when you accept that you're not always the center, and with that acceptance comes freedom. Empathy isn't weakness, it's an expansion. People often think of empathy as something soft, but it's actually a widening of your lens. Empathy doesn't mean pleasing everyone. It means treating the other person as a full human being, not as a supporting character in your own story. When you make that shift, something changes in your life. You stop taking offense so easily. You stop feeling threatened by every bit of competition, because you understand that everyone is moving under their own pressures, and that understanding melts away a lot of your reactivity. Picture a service counter, a bank, or a phone company store. The line is long, you're running late, and the staff seems slow. Your ego speaks up. My time matters. You raise your voice, get sharp, and want them to feel your urgency. The staff member becomes defensive, the process slows down even more, and you get even angrier. A small version of narcissism was running the show here, your urgency ruling the universe. But if you widen your view even slightly, you might see another possibility. The staff member is overworked, the system is down, and they're under pressure too. That insight doesn't make you a saint, but it does make you a little less toxic, and your entire day, your body, even your blood pressure benefit from it. So what shifts when you understand this law? It isn't telling you to give up self-love. Self-love matters. It's telling you not to let self-love multiply out of control. When you make everything about yourself, you become heavy to carry, and carrying a heavy self is exhausting. The insight here is that you need attention. Everyone does. But the moment you actually see your own hunger for attention, you naturally become a little gentler, because now you're observing your need instead of being controlled by it. Observation gives you a different kind of power. The power to choose who you lean on to meet that need, or whether you choose instead to see other people as real, complete human beings. Empathy isn't a technique. It isn't even a mood. Empathy is a state where you're at peace enough with yourself that you can step outside of yourself and accept the reality of someone else's world. When you do that, your ego becomes lighter. A lighter ego thinks more clearly, feels more stable, and can hear more truth. Just remember this today. When you feel like the world is ignoring you, maybe you're ignoring the world too. In the next episode, we'll look at the law of role-playing, how people protect their image with masks, and how you can see through those masks without judgment. Episode 3. The law of role-playing, see the people behind the masks. Have you ever met someone so sweet, so composed, so put together that you started to think, This person could never be wrong. And then, after a while, you saw a completely different version of them, same face, same voice, but a totally different energy. In that moment, you were probably confused. Which version was real? Today's law explains that confusion. Human beings don't have just one face. Every person adapts their role to fit the situation, shaping their presence, sometimes consciously, sometimes without even realizing it. This is where a big misunderstanding sneaks in. You mistake someone's words for the whole truth and their role for their identity. Role-playing doesn't mean everyone is fake. It means that in social life, we all edit ourselves. You don't say what you truly feel at work the same way you might at a family gathering. You don't reveal what you actually think the way you highlight only the acceptable side of yourself online. Sometimes this mask is protection. Sometimes it's strategy. Sometimes it's just habit. The essence of this law is that people manage their image because that image feels like their safety net. If you focus only on the image, you'll frequently misread people, and misreading creates unnecessary hurt. Why do masks exist in the first place? Imagine for a second that every thought you had became audible, every irritation became visible, every insecurity was laid bare. You couldn't survive socially. Masks exist because human beings need acceptance, need belonging, need approval. A mask works on the logic of "I'll look the way I think you'll love." Sometimes a mask makes you sweet, sometimes tough, sometimes funny, sometimes constantly busy. The most interesting mask of all is the one you start believing in yourself, where you practice the performance so long that you forget it ever was one. So how do you know when a mask is at work? You don't need a checklist of detective skills, you just need awareness. Words are often smooth, but presence carries a different message. Someone might say, "I'm totally fine," but there's a small pause in their silence. There's a delay before their laugh. There's an escape route in their eye contact. That's the nature of a mask. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be convincing. If you only listen to the words, you become a hostage to the surface. When you observe the whole person, timing, consistency, reactions, you get closer to the truth. Here's a modern workplace scenario, the Zoom world. You've probably noticed that in online meetings, everyone puts on a smooth, professional voice. Everything sounds great, but right after the call, the same people say something completely different in the private chat. "What a ridiculous plan," or "They just took the credit for something I said." The role-playing is obvious here, the public mask is agreeable, the private self is critical. If you're naive, you'll rely only on the public version and assume the team is fully aligned. Then when execution time comes, things quietly fall apart, deadlines slip, effort is half-hearted. You feel hurt, you feel angry, you think, "This is so unfair." But this law reminds you that unfairness sometimes happens, and so does blindness. You mistook a role for a person. You mistook a yes for a real commitment. You mistook politeness for honesty. This law isn't meant to make you cynical. It's meant to make you clear-eyed. Here's another one, the soft mask of office politics. A colleague walks up to your desk with a warm smile and a compliment. "You're doing a great job." You relax. Later that same day, you overhear the same colleague tell someone else, "That was just luck." You're shocked and your mind jumps to a conclusion. They're fake, maybe. Or maybe they're insecure. Maybe they feel competitive. Maybe they simply wear different faces for different audiences. The law of role-playing teaches you this. People often change masks to protect their self-image, less out of personal hatred toward you and more out of their own fear. When you understand this, you stop absorbing their behavior personally. You get hurt less, and you make cleaner decisions. Or a dating scenario. You meet someone online. Their profile is polished, gym photos, books, travel, clever captions, all the green flags. On the first date, they're charming, attentive, funny. Same on the second date. On the third date, something small goes wrong, the waiter is a little slow and their tone shifts, their patience evaporates, their face tightens. You see a crack and you're confused. Is this the same person? Yes, it's the same person, just a different role. During the early dating phase, people often present their best selves because there's fear of rejection, pressure to be chosen, and a hunger for validation. This law gives you a useful piece of awareness. First impressions are, of course, a starting point, but character reveals itself slowly. Ignoring this means mistaking surface for depth, mistaking performance for real intimacy, and getting attached too quickly. Then when the real personality shows up, you either deny it, it was just a bad day, or overcorrect, it was all a lie. This law offers a middle path. Acknowledge the mask, acknowledge the cracks, and let time reveal the truth. Here's a family scenario. At a gathering, an aunt sweetly says, "Sweetheart, you look absolutely perfect." But there's a subtle note of comparison in her tone. The next minute she tells someone else, "Have you noticed she's gained a little weight?" and laughs about it. The name for this kind of mask is concern, but it's really hidden control. If you don't understand this law, you get confused, you feel guilty, you explain yourself, you start doubting your own body. Then you go home irritated, resentful toward your family, and you start pulling away. What this law shows you is that some people wear the mask of care to cross your boundaries politely. That doesn't mean you should turn everyone into a villain. It means don't just swallow the sugar-coated words, understand the intent underneath them. Social media has its own version of this. You curate yourself online, the best angle, the right lighting, the right filter, the right caption. You don't share your struggles, or if you do, you present them aesthetically. Why? Because you're playing a role too. I'm strong, I'm happy, I have it all figured out. And when you play that role every single day, you can start to believe you actually are that person. Then one day you have a real breakdown and you feel ashamed. How could I feel this way? I'm supposed to be put together. No, you're human. This law offers a deep insight here. Masks don't only make people look good. Sometimes a mask makes you feel like a fraud. And when you recognize your own mask, you naturally become a little kinder to yourself and to others. How does ignoring this law lead to suffering? It takes you to 3 places. You trust too quickly, mistaking niceness for safety, and then you feel betrayed and swing to an extreme, either blind trust or total distrust. You judge too quickly, mistaking someone's awkwardness for arrogance, mistaking silence for a bad attitude, and creating unnecessary conflict. And you forget your own mask, mistaking your role for the truth, which makes you rigid and stops your own growth, since you feel you have to maintain that image. The real root of suffering here isn't reality, it's the story you build on top of it. You react to the wrong narrative, and that reaction turns an ordinary situation into a small tragedy. Here's a lighter scene, the funny one in your friend group. There's always that one friend who's cracking jokes and lightening every serious moment. Everyone laughs and you assume this person never gets stressed. One day you genuinely ask him, "Don't you ever feel down?" He smiles and says, "Me? No." But for a split second, there's a flicker of tiredness in his eyes. Later, you learn he's actually burned out and lonely. He plays the funny role because it earns him acceptance. If you had taken his mask at face value, you would have missed his pain completely. This law teaches you that sometimes a mask isn't a lie. Sometimes a mask is armor, and when you respect the armor, you gain real closure with the person wearing it. What are people actually protecting behind their masks? You don't need to become a mind reader. You just need to understand that people are usually protecting 3 things: their image, their insecurity, and their sense of control. They act confident to protect their image. They act moral or helpful or busy to protect their insecurity or their need for control. Once you notice this pattern, you stop taking it personally, and you stop becoming an emotional hostage to it. You can hold 2 truths at once, that a person can be both polite and manipulative, both strong and scared. Life is full of shades of gray. Even a mask isn't purely black or white. And here's a quiet truth, you wear a mask too. When you meet someone, you present a respectable version of yourself. You hide your jealousy, your pettiness, your neediness. That's normal. The problem starts when you mistake your own mask for your true scent, when you judge others by saying, "I'm not like that," while deep down, in certain moments, you are. It's just that your mask happens to be better designed. This law gives you humility. I perform too. And with that humility, you become a better observer, because understanding yourself makes you far more accurate at understanding others. In relationships, there's a familiar drama around the phrase, "I'm fine." How many times have you heard that? And you know that fine doesn't always mean fine. Sometimes it means I'm hurt but I don't want to seem vulnerable. Sometimes it means I need attention but I can't ask for it directly. Sometimes it means I think you should understand without me having to explain. If you take the word fine literally, you end up starting a fight. If you're fine, then what's the problem? Followed by a Cold War. This law shows you that some people hide their feelings not to deceive you but to protect themselves. That insight makes you more patient. You stop trying to control the situation, you stop reacting so fast, and you simply stay present, and presence often softens the mask on its own. The core message of this law isn't that everyone is fake. The core message is that everyone is human. Masks are a survival tool, sometimes for social harmony, sometimes for fairness, sometimes for ambition. Once you understand that, your entire lens shifts. You stop being hypnotized by charm and you stop being wrecked by someone's rudeness. You start asking, what is this role trying to protect? And that question gives you power, not power over other people, but power over your own reactions. One day, you'll realize that suffering in life doesn't come from events alone. It comes from the interpretations we layer on top of them, and role-playing is deeply tangled up in those interpretations. This law cleans up your interpretations. You stop stopping at the surface and you start respecting the depth underneath. And the best ending of all is this. When you finally see the mask clearly, you also see yourself. You accept the performer inside you. You accept the scared version of yourself. You accept the hungry version of yourself. And once you accept those parts, you no longer feel such a strong need to prove yourself, to win every exchange, or to perform constantly. You simply become more real. In the next episode, we'll talk about compulsive behavior, why people repeat the same patterns over and over, and how you can spot those patterns ahead of time. Episode 4. The Law of Compulsive Behavior. Read the character behind the pattern. Have you ever known someone who keeps saying, "This time I've really changed," and then a few days later the same mistake, the same tone, the same reaction, and the same damage follow? You think, this person is so smart, why do they keep repeating this? That's today's law, compulsive behavior. In simple terms, this law says that people tend to settle into a fixed groove of character. That groove feels familiar to them. It feels safe, whether or not it's actually good for them. And that explains a recurring confusion in your own life too. Why do I keep ending up in the same place? Why do I keep meeting the same type of people? The answer lies right here. In its own words, compulsive behavior doesn't mean a person can never change. It means that under pressure, a person tends to revert to their default patterns. Everyone can appear mature when life is calm. It's the storm that reveals character, and character shows up more clearly in someone's tendencies than in their stated intentions. Someone says, "I care about you," but when their ego gets bruised, they disappear. Someone promises, "I'll be on time," but the moment they get bored, being late suddenly feels normal to them. Someone insists, "I'm honest," but when consequences show up, they twist their own words. The center of this law is simple. Don't judge someone by their best moment, judge them by their recurring moments. What's really behind this? Human beings love predictability, even when that predictability is toxic, because patterns come with a hidden benefit. They give you an identity. I'm direct, sometimes that means cruel. I'm emotional, sometimes that means manipulative. I'm independent, sometimes that means avoidant. I'm laid back, sometimes that means irresponsible. You turn your pattern into a label, and you turn that label into a shield. Then, when life pushes you to actually change, your mind resists, not because change is impossible, but because change is uncomfortable. And compulsive behavior is fueled by running from that discomfort. When stress hits, your mind reaches for shortcuts, old reactions, old defenses, old excuses. That's why some people say the exact same lines every time they're angry. Some go silent in every conflict. Some attack the moment they receive criticism. Some create distance the instant intimacy grows. They're not consciously choosing this, they're slipping back into their groove. Here's a workplace scenario: the firefighter colleague. There's always someone in the office who becomes a hero every time a crisis hits. A deadline is about to be missed, a client is furious, a system issue erupts, and that person stays up all night to save the day. Everyone says, "Wow, what dedication." But this happens over and over, every sprint, every project. Eventually, you notice the crisis isn't accidental. The crisis is actually their comfort zone. Because in crisis, they get attention, they get a sense of purpose, they get the high of being needed. Meanwhile, normal planning, normal discipline, normal consistency feels boring to them. So the team keeps struggling because this person never builds systems, they just put out fires. The trap here is mistaking their dedication for character, when it's actually an addiction to crisis. Understanding this law makes you less dazzled by dramatic moments and more attuned to the underlying pattern. Or picture a relationship where someone repeatedly hurts their partner, sometimes with harsh words, sometimes with a dismissive tone, sometimes by simply vanishing. Then comes the apology, the long message, the tears, the promises. "I'm not really like that. I was just in a bad mood." You mistake that apology for love. You mistake that emotional display for sincerity. Then a few sweet days pass, a new trigger hits, and the same behavior resurfaces. You're confused because you feel like you're seeing two different people. But this law says, don't look at versions, look at patterns. An apology is a single moment. Behavior is a map. And a map that keeps leading you to the same destination isn't a mistake, it's a direction. This is where the suffering comes from. You turn hope into evidence, and you turn a possible future into a present reality that hasn't actually happened. This law doesn't make you cold, it makes you clear. Here's a social media pattern. A friend who's always outraged online. One week it's politics, another it's celebrities, another it's random strangers, angry stories, sarcastic comments, screenshots shared in group chats. They say, "I'm just standing up for the truth." But you notice the intensity is out of proportion to the actual issue. Outrage makes them feel alive, gives them a sense of belonging with an equally angry crowd, and gives them an identity. I'm aware, other people are blind. Then in real life, that same person can't tolerate an ordinary disagreement. They mistake a different opinion for disrespect, mistake honest feedback for weakness. If you don't understand this pattern, you assume they're simply passionate, when really they're compulsive, and if you're close to them, you'll find yourself constantly feeding their fire. Once you understand it, you don't need to feel guilty about creating distance. You can see that distance as a healthy boundary. A subtle but important signal for spotting compulsive behavior is disproportion. A huge burst of anger over something small, intense defensiveness over minor feedback, deep suspicion over a small delay. Disproportionate reactions mean that the present moment is just the trigger. The real energy is coming from somewhere in the past. And when the past is driving the car, your choices become weaker. Sometimes you'll notice the same person fighting the same fight everywhere, at work, in relationships within their family. Different faces, same underlying drama. This law treats character not as something that shifts with the situation, but as something fundamentally consistent. Here's an everyday example about money. Some people say every single month, "I'll finally start saving this month." The salary comes in, and then it goes right back out, shopping, food deliveries, gadgets, weekend plans. Then anxiety hits at the end of the month, followed by the same self-talk. Definitely next month. This isn't laziness, it's a pattern rooted in a craving for instant comfort and an inability to emotionally connect with future discomfort. The future is just an abstract idea. The present is an urgent request, and resisting that request would require a shift in identity. This law says, don't judge a person by their plans, judge them by their repeated compromises. Every compromise leaves a fingerprint. Is this pattern only about other people? Honestly, compulsive behavior shows up in you too. You sometimes repeat the same line in an argument, even knowing it will cause damage. You sometimes scroll late into the night, even knowing you'll regret it the next morning. You sometimes agree to something out of sheer exhaustion, even when you don't have the energy for it. Why? Because the pattern gives you immediate relief. Immediate relief works like a sedative, long-term clarity works slowly. The gift of this law is that you can set aside the shame and simply observe the pattern. Once you see it, you don't become perfect, but you do start to become aware, and awareness is the first real crack in autopilot living. What does character actually mean in this context? It doesn't mean a moral lecture. It means, which direction do you lean under pressure? Some people become controlling under pressure. Some become victims. Some become liars. Some collapse. Some go cold. And some, strangely, become hyperactive under pressure. When someone has genuinely evolved their patterns, it usually means they've recognized their own impulses, decoded their own defense mechanisms, and made their self-image a little more flexible. The way this law helps you make that shift is by focusing more on what people revert to than on what they aspire to. That's where the truth lives. Here's a leadership scenario about credit addiction. Imagine a manager who consistently frames the team's work as his own achievement. He says, "I'm guiding you," but again and again he claims the credit. Sometimes he gives out praise when it's necessary to protect his public image. Sometimes he shifts the blame when there's risk involved. The team feels confused, some defend him. He's the boss, he's under pressure. But this law reminds you that everyone experiences pressure. What matters is the pattern. If credit stealing keeps happening, it's not a one-off event. It's a character trade. Once you understand this, you can reset your expectations. You stop expecting emotional fairness and you build your own protection naturally, through clear-eyed observation rather than plotting. How does ignorance of this law trap you? In two ways. The first trap is exceptional moments. Someone catches you off guard one day with unusual kindness and you declare that day their real self. But compulsive behavior reveals itself on ordinary days, not exceptional ones. The second trap is explanations. People offer reasons: stress, childhood, workload, mood, misunderstandings. Those reasons can be real, but reasons can also become a pattern. If the same excuse comes up every single week, it stops being a reason and becomes a mask. The suffering that comes from ignoring this law is that you keep negotiating with the excuses instead of reading the pattern underneath them. Here's a road rage scene. You're stuck in traffic, a motorcyclist cuts you off, you honk, they honk back. Words are exchanged and egos ignite. If you're with someone whose dominant pattern is to never let anything go, they'll chase the argument, push it further, and take real risks just to feel like the winner. Later at home, they say, "I was right." But this law shows you that right is sometimes just an excuse used to justify a compulsion, for control, for power, for avoiding humiliation. And if you don't recognize that pattern, every drive becomes anxiety-inducing. Every outing turns tense. The advantage of awareness is that you learn to understand the driver behind the wheel, not just the event on the road. The purpose of this law isn't advice, it's awakening. When you observe someone and quietly feel, this person keeps repeating this, remember, repetition isn't inherently bad. Repetition is human. It becomes a problem only when it damages you and you keep excusing it as a one-time exception. Awareness doesn't make you tougher, it makes you steadier. You stop mistaking drama for romance. You stop mistaking intensity for sincerity. You stop mistaking promises for reality. And with that comes a quiet kind of power, the ability to predict, not because you control other people, but because you can see their patterns. Once you start seeing patterns, your own reactions naturally slow down. You don't attach too quickly, you don't panic too easily, and you don't rush toward a quick fix. You simply observe, and observation leads to clarity, clarity leads to better choices, and better choices lead to freedom. In the next episode, we'll look at envy, its quiet, hidden form, and how it fuels short-sightedness and impulsive decisions. Episode 5. The Law of Covetousness, How Desire Becomes a Magnet. Have you ever noticed how, when you want something just a little, it doesn't feel very powerful, but the moment you realize someone else already has it, it suddenly becomes priceless? The same phone, the same job title, the same relationship, the same city, the same lifestyle. The only thing that's changed is that someone else has it. And a quiet pressure starts building inside you. You think, "I want that too," not because it truly fits your life, but because it signals something. Today's law reveals this mechanism. Covetousness is the contagious nature of desire. This is one of the most uncomfortable truths in this whole series. Your desire is often not entirely your own. It's borrowed, it's copied, it's social. Covetousness isn't just a simple word for greed. It's the instinct where you judge things not by their actual usefulness to you, but by their perceived value. Perceived value is shaped by scarcity, status, attention, and other people's perspective. You want something because you believe it will make you look important, make you seem chosen, make you seem ahead, or make you feel safe. Here's the twist. Desire motivates you, but covetousness makes you restless because you're chasing something without being clear about what you're actually chasing. The object or your own identity. What drives this behavior? Humans are social animals. We measure our worth through comparison. You don't just look in the mirror, you imagine yourself through the eyes of others. And when you imagine that, you build a role for yourself. The successful me, the desirable me, the respected me, the unbothered me. Then you attach those roles to objects, cars, job titles, partners, followers, brands, lifestyles, and those objects become symbols. The power of a symbol is that, for one brief second, it makes you feel like the person you want to be. And that second becomes addictive. You acquire one thing, feel happy, then normal, and then you're already searching for the next thing. The engine of covetousness never stops because it's built for constant movement, not lasting satisfaction. Here's a social media scenario, the perfect life scroll. You're on your phone at night. Someone posts a new home, someone posts a promotion, someone posts a surprise engagement, someone posts a trip to Europe. You see it once, nice. You see it a second time, a third time, and a quiet restlessness builds. You start looking at your own life differently. The same bed you slept in yesterday suddenly feels less comfortable today. The same city that felt exciting yesterday feels suffocating today. The same relationship that felt warm yesterday suddenly feels like something's missing. Why? Because your mind is quietly telling you, what you're living isn't enough unless it's publicly impressive. This is where suffering starts. You mistake peace for boredom, stability for stagnation, and quiet progress for something not worth celebrating. And you start chasing highlight reels instead. Here's a workplace version, title hunger. You're doing solid work. You're reliable, people respect you. Then you see someone else get called lead. Someone else gets the visible project. Someone else gets photographed with the manager. Your own work hasn't changed, but your mood has. You can't focus. You get irritated. You throw sharp comments in meetings. You start overworking yourself, purely chasing a label. Even if you eventually get that label, you're still not satisfied because you've already started eyeing the next one. What's happened here is a shift from growth to status. Growth is slow. Status is an instant signal. The cost of this pattern is that you slowly lose your craft, your curiosity, and your self-respect in exchange for external validation. Here's a relationship scenario, addiction to being chosen. You're with someone caring, present, connected. But when a third person compliments your partner, you become oddly alert. You smile, but something tightens inside. You start asking casual questions with a controlling undertone. You crave that attention for yourself. You tell yourself you're just protecting the relationship, but sometimes you're protecting your own status. I'm the chosen one. There are two ways this damages the relationship. First, you turn your partner into a trophy rather than a person, and a trophy's job is to be shown off, while a person's job is not to be a trophy. Second, you start comparing your relationship to others. Their couple goals are cuter, their surprise was grander, their photo is more perfect. Now your own bond feels like a pressure cooker where even ordinary love feels insufficient. This is where you loosen your grip on gratitude and turn intimacy into an endless demand for reassurance. The hidden face of covetousness sometimes wears the mask of inspiration. You see someone with a great physique and say, I found motivation. Inspiration is genuinely good, but covetousness sometimes borrows that word. What you're actually feeling might be, I want the recognition they're getting. If you see someone's follower count, you decide to start a content business. If you see someone's startup, you decide to become an entrepreneur. If you see someone's aesthetic life, you decide to become a minimalist. The problem isn't starting something new. The problem is not asking yourself why you're doing it. Borrowed motivation often ends in burnout because you're not honoring your own nature, you're running against it. Here's a small original scene. You're at the mall planning to just window shop. You're relaxed. Then you see a sign outside a store, limited drop today only, last pieces. Suddenly your heart beats a little faster. You walk in, you touch the item, and you imagine owning it, and that imagination arrives before the item does. 10 minutes ago you had no need for it. Now you're convinced it's necessary. That's the psychology of covetousness. Scarcity creates urgency. Urgency creates a sense of importance, and that sense of importance creates identity. When you ignore this law, you treat purchases as decisions when they're often just reactions. And reactions lead to clutter, debt, regret, and a persistent feeling of never having enough. There's a thin line between covetousness and envy. The difference is subtle. Envy says, I want what you have, while covetousness says, I want that thing. The root of both is comparison, and both make you restless. When you're restless, you quietly insult your own present life, not loudly but quietly. You minimize your own achievements. You brush past your own progress. You appreciate your own people a little less because your attention is fixed on what's next, the next phone, the next city, the next relationship, the next title, the next level. And you don't even notice that in the name of next. Your mind is really just escaping from ordinary feelings, from boredom, from insecurity, from emptiness. Covetousness becomes a distraction that keeps you too busy to actually feel any of that. Here's a workplace pattern, the networker's mask. There's often someone in an office who's always working the connections, aligning with the manager, hanging around high-status people, making sure they're visible in the important meetings. They say, I'm just taking my career seriously. Maybe. But sometimes this isn't seriousness, it's covetousness, a hunger for status that they're trying to harvest instead of earn. They're not learning, they're building an image. This might pay off in the short term, but trust weakens over time. The team stops opening up to them, they feel lonely, and ironically, they work even harder on the image. This creates a loop. The deeper they get caught up in the status game, the less they nourish their actual skills. And when a real moment of pressure arrives, the image runs dry. Here's a relationship scenario, the better option syndrome. There's a quiet poison in modern dating. Maybe someone else would be better. You're with someone, things are going decently, but you find yourself casually checking dating apps, telling yourself, I'm just looking. Deep down, though, you're comparing, counting the alternatives. Covetousness gives you an illusion that the best option is always one swipe away. That illusion is expensive. You never fully commit to the person in front of you, you never fully build the bond, and you start treating commitment as a trap. One day you realize you've seen a lot of people, but you don't truly know any of them because knowing someone requires stillness, and covetousness has no tolerance for stillness. How does covetousness hijack your own inner radar for desire? Your desire isn't neutral, it's influenced. By the crowd, everyone's doing this. By algorithms showing you the same thing over and over. By culture, this is the symbol of a successful life. And by fear, if I don't have it, I'm falling behind. When you mistake this influenced desire for your true desire, you start building your life according to someone else's blueprint. And when that borrowed blueprint doesn't fit, frustration sets in. Frustration pushes you to chase even harder, and the chase makes you feel even more hollow. That's the pattern of suffering born from ignoring this law. You mistake desire for a compass, when sometimes it's just noise. What shifts once you understand covetousness? Internally, everything. The point of this law isn't to make you less ambitious, it's to make you less possessed. Feel the difference. Ambition says, I'm building. Covetousness says, I'm proving. Ambition says, I'm growing. Covetousness says, I'm keeping up. Ambition gives you direction. Covetousness gives you restlessness. When you recognize covetousness, you put objects back in their rightful place. A car stays a car. A title stays a title. A follower count stays a number. It stops being a report card for your soul. And this shift gives you something surprising. Not the feeling that you've gotten everything, but the understanding that everything was never a finish line to begin with. Here's a small original scene about a friend's sudden shift in warmth. One day your friend is much warmer toward you than usual. The next week, cold. You look for a reason and notice they've joined a new, more social friend group, more happening people, more parties, more photos. Suddenly you feel less interesting to them. It sounds personal, and of course it stings. But this law offers you a different lens. Sometimes people aren't chasing you, they're chasing status. And you become a stepping stone for them, not a person. This is where the suffering starts. You begin doubting your own worth. But the real insight here is, their behavior is not proof of your value. Their behavior is proof of their own restlessness. Once you see that, you avoid a lot of unnecessary hurt. You don't carry bitterness, you carry clarity. The most useful technique this law offers isn't a strategy, it's recognition. When a desire rises up inside you, you can ask yourself a simple, honest question. Do I want this thing, or am I looking for a feeling through this thing? A feeling of being seen, a feeling of being enough, a feeling of being ahead, a feeling of being secure. Once you let those underlying feelings surface, you realize that objects break their own spell. You'll still like things, you'll still have goals, but you won't become their servant. You'll enjoy them without collapsing over them. You'll want things without worshiping them, because real power isn't about having everything. Real power is knowing what's actually controlling you. And the day you see your own desire clearly is the day a new kind of silence enters your life. That silence isn't boring, it's grounding. It's a reminder that you're human, that you want things, but you can also live beyond wanting. In the next episode, we'll cover Law 6, the law of short-sightedness, instant gratification, impulsive choices, and long-term blindness. Episode 6, the law of short-sightedness, lift your gaze. Have you ever heard yourself say, just for now, just today, just this once? And then a few weeks later, you're watching that exact thing become a permanent pattern in your life, one you never thought possible. Today's law exposes that quiet trap, short-sightedness. This law shows you that the human mind knows the future exists, but it doesn't fully feel it. And when you don't feel it, you don't consciously choose, you drift. In its own terms, short-sightedness doesn't mean you're foolish. It means your attention naturally gravitates toward the nearest thing, the nearest comfort, the nearest validation, the nearest fear, the nearest win. You mistake short-term victory for long-term success. You mistake a passing emotion for the truth. And then tomorrow arrives, tomorrow's price arrives, tomorrow's regret sets in. This is the core of the law. The direction of your life is shaped less by your big decisions and more by the accumulation of small, impulsive ones. Because your time horizon is small. That small horizon is called short-sightedness. What's behind this pattern? There are two voices inside you. One is slow, quiet, and mature. It speaks for the long term and makes you patient. The other is fast, loud, and emotional. It speaks for right now and makes you feel urgent. Short-sightedness wins whenever that second voice convinces you, we'll deal with it tomorrow. This is fine for now. You think it's a small compromise, but compromises accumulate. They form a river that carries you toward places you never intended to go. The irony of this law is that you try to protect the present by avoiding the future. But eventually, you lose the present too, because you end up living in constant damage control. Here's a workplace scenario, quick win culture. You're on a team with a tight timeline. The manager says, just get me results this quarter. The team's mood turns into a sprint. You cut corners, skip proper testing, skip documentation, and promise features that aren't fully ready. For a moment it works, the client's happy, the boss is happy, you feel like a hero. Then 2 months later, the cracks appear. Bug reports, angry users, stress meetings, weekend calls, emergency patches. You can't get your time back. You can't get your energy back. And worst of all, your credibility takes a hit. That's the pain of short-sightedness. You mortgage long-term peace for a burst of instant applause. When you ignore this law, you end up confused. I worked so hard, why is my life still such a mess? Sometimes chaos comes not from a lack of effort, but from a narrow horizon. You were working hard, but with your eyes fixed on the ground. Here's another scenario, image over skill. You scroll past someone's post, humbled to announce my new role. A quiet pressure builds inside you. I should be visible too. So you start creating content, hot takes, threads, and networking events. You attend meetings just for the selfie, you speak up just to be heard. Skills build slowly and skills feel boring. Skills don't get likes, instant visibility does. Short-sightedness pulls you into the trap of looking successful, but looking successful isn't the same as becoming successful. One day you realize you're popular but not dependable, noticeable but not valuable. The suffering here comes from feeding your identity with shallow signals, and shallow signals were never built to last. Here's a money scenario. You tell yourself you'll balance your monthly budget. Then the weekend arrives, friends' plans, sales notifications, cravings, food delivery. You say, just this once, just one order, just one purchase. And before long you're living paycheck to paycheck, or worse, buried in installment payments. This is the trap of short-sightedness. You think you're enjoying your life, but you're really postponing it, eating away at your future comfort. You laugh in the present, but in the background, your mind is quietly calculating. How am I going to manage next month? This is a strange kind of freedom, purchased through constant compromise. Health is the body's silent ledger. You get tired, you say, I'll rest today. But instead of true rest, you feed the screen, late night scrolling, less sleep, a dull morning. You get through it and the next day too. But gradually your baseline shifts, lower energy, unstable mood, weaker focus. And then you say, I'm just lazy. But you might actually be caught in a short-sighted loop where immediate comfort is quietly draining your long-term vitality. Your body doesn't argue with you outright. It simply charges interest, and that interest always comes due eventually. Here's a relationship scenario, winning the argument. A fight breaks out over something small, tone, timing, attention, but underneath, the real feeling is big. I want respect, I want to be understood. Short-sightedness offers a dangerous shortcut here. Win the moment. You deliver a sharp line, you bring up things from the past, you use sarcasm to push your partner away, you corner them. And for a moment you feel powerful, your partner goes quiet. You think, done. But relationships have memory. They store words, tone, and humiliation. Closeness decreases, warmth fades, trust becomes fragile. You won the argument, but at the cost of long-term loneliness, and that loneliness then makes you even more reactive the next time. There's also the comfort of silent punishment, choosing silence not to de-escalate a fight, but to punish. You tell yourself you're just taking space, but deep down, you want the other person to panic, to chase you, to prove something. Short-term, this gives you relief, no confrontation, no vulnerability. Long-term, it thins out the connection. Your partner grows tired of guessing what's wrong and eventually detaches. Relationships aren't built through occasional conversations. They're built through consistent openness, and short-sightedness mistakes that openness for a threat, when what you were really seeking was safety, but what you created instead was distance. Then there's the digital version of short-sightedness, the little dopamine horizon. A notification arrives, you pick up your phone just for one glance, and 10 minutes are gone. Then 30, then 60. You tell yourself you took a break, but real breaks refresh you, and this isn't refreshing you, it's wearing you down. You're using a dopamine hit to escape boredom, but that dopamine hit leaves you more restless. Restlessness kills focus. When focus goes, progress goes with it. When progress disappears, insecurity creeps in, and insecurity sends you right back to scrolling. You're supposed to be building your future, but you're quietly eroding your present. How does ignoring this law turn into suffering? 3 ways. You lose a sense of consequences and start acting in isolation. No peace, no perspective, everything viewed in extreme close-up. A close-up of emotion, a close-up of ego, and close-ups distort reality. You lose self-trust because when you keep sacrificing tomorrow, your mind quietly registers, I don't keep my own word, and then it becomes hard to respect yourself. The biggest damage from short-sightedness isn't external, it's internal. You end up managing your life instead of actually leading it. Here's a small revenge scene. A colleague interrupts you in a meeting, you feel humiliated. The next day, you get your chance and highlight their mistakes in front of everyone. People laugh and you feel powerful. But now a memory is locked inside that colleague. They embarrassed me. From now on, they won't help you, won't support you, and may even quietly resist you. Today you satisfied your ego. Yesterday's alliance is broken. Short-sightedness makes revenge feel sweet in the moment, but the aftertaste lingers far longer than the satisfaction did. What actually changes inside you once you understand this law? It doesn't turn you into a perfect planner, it makes you clearer. When you recognize short-sightedness, a natural pause enters your life, not a forced pause, but a genuine one, because you've seen how present comfort can become future chaos. A win now could become a loss later. Silence now could become distance later. You start to genuinely feel the long term, and once you feel it, the small impulses lose their grip. Dramatic decisions stop seeming interesting. Steady decisions start to feel respectable. Today, picture your life as a road trip. Short-sightedness traps you in the beam of your headlights. It limits your vision, and you accept only what's directly in the light as reality. But you know there's road beyond that beam, turns, slopes, and traffic you haven't seen yet. This law doesn't ask you to control the future. It simply asks you not to deny it, because denial is easy, and easy things tend to trap you in a repeating loop. When you lift your gaze, your life slows down, but it also becomes stable. And stability doesn't mean boring. Stability means you're constantly renewing your energy instead of spending it all on cleanup. You're building, quietly, consistently. Episode 7. The Law of Defensiveness. Recognize the ego's wall. Have you ever noticed how easy some people are to talk to and how difficult others are? A single simple point turns into a minefield. You raise something ordinary, and suddenly their face tightens, their eyes sharpen, their tone turns to steel, as if you hadn't offered feedback but attacked their core identity. Today's law reveals the secret of that moment: defensiveness. This law shows that humans often don't defend their mistake, they defend their self-image. And when self-image feels threatened, truth becomes secondary, connection becomes secondary. Only one thing matters: I can't be wrong. In its own terms, defensiveness doesn't mean you're weak, it means your ego is on high alert. The ego's job is to keep you feeling stable, feeling respectable, feeling like I'm okay. But when a comment, a piece of feedback, or a look shakes that "I'm okay" narrative, an alarm goes off. Once the alarm sounds, a person tends to do one of two things: attack or deny. Sometimes they crack a joke to deflect, sometimes they change the subject, sometimes they play the victim, sometimes they claim the moral high ground. The form varies, but the function is the same: protect myself, whatever the cost. What drives this pattern? There's an invisible file inside you. Who am I? I'm responsible, I'm loyal, I'm smart, I'm caring, I'm strong. This identity gives you energy, but it also makes you fragile, because when you cling tightly to a label, even a small correction can feel like an attack on that label. If you consider yourself responsible, feedback about being late feels like an insult. If you consider yourself caring, someone pointing out that you ignored them feels unjust. If you consider yourself intelligent, disagreement feels disrespectful. Defensiveness is really an attempt to avoid pain, specifically the pain of shame. Shame doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means the feeling of "I am less, I am not enough, I am exposed." The ego is afraid of shame, so it builds walls. And once those walls go up, you feel safe, but you also stay closed off. Here's a workplace scenario. Your manager says the presentation was good, but the slides were a bit cluttered. Keep it simpler next time. That's normal, everyday feedback, but something inside you spikes. You smile outwardly while a voice inside whispers, "Cluttered means I'm incompetent." So you reply, "Actually, we had less time and the data from the team came in late." Notice, you're not explaining, you're defending. The manager was simply offering a point for improvement. You turned it into a threat to your identity. Now your manager will hesitate to give you feedback in the future. They'll grow cautious and create distance. You might think, "My boss isn't very supportive." But sometimes it's not the boss who isn't supportive, it's that they no longer feel safe being honest with you. The cost of defensiveness is that you lose out on learning, because real learning requires being able to admit, "I could do better here." And if you can't admit that, You repeat the same mistake indefinitely. Here's a team dynamic scenario. In a meeting, someone questions your idea. This approach carries some risk. You instantly feel attacked and respond, "Don't you understand? I've done this before. You're just being negative." Now the meeting's focus shifts from problem solving to ego defending. People become less interested in your idea and more focused on your tone. They agree with you outwardly but quietly disengage inwardly, and they stop contributing. Here's the strange result of defensiveness. You're gripping tightly for control, but you're actually losing influence. Because influence is built on trust, and trust needs people to feel safe speaking up. In defensive environments, people go quiet, and quiet teams move slowly. Here's a relationship scenario. Your partner says, "When I share something with you, you go on your phone, it hurts my feelings." They're expressing an emotion, not delivering a verdict, but all you hear is, "You're a bad partner." Your ego rises and you respond, "I'm busy too. I'm tired from work. You're overreacting." Now their feelings have become invisible, and the whole point of the conversation has flipped from finding the truth to winning. And winning isn't sweet in a relationship. Winning creates distance in a relationship. What does defensiveness do here? It protects you from vulnerability, but intimacy is built on vulnerability. You've made yourself safer, but not closer. There's also a fake version of sorry. Defensiveness has a classic mask, the apology that isn't really an apology. Sorry you felt that way isn't an apology, it's a negotiation. It says, "I'll say sorry, but I don't want to actually feel guilty because guilt threatens my ego." When a real apology happens, the other person can feel it, they relax, they let their guard down, they trust more. This is the cost of defensiveness. You keep the peace on the surface, but the bond weakens underneath. Online, defensiveness shows up as identity warfare. You post an opinion, someone comments, "I disagree." That's it, but your nervous system takes it personally. You write a long, sharp, final-sounding reply. Why? Because online, opinions have quietly turned into identities, from "I believe" to "I am this." And when belief becomes identity, disagreement feels like a threat. Defensiveness gets loud online. Sarcasm, mockery, screenshots, public callouts, humiliation. But underneath, the fear is the same. I might be wrong, and the ego says, "Never." The result is that you become more rigid, you find nuance exhausting, and you find casual conversation boring. Defensiveness makes you feel strong, but it also makes you brittle, and a brittle mind doesn't grow, it only protects. Here's a small scene from a car ride. You're in traffic, you change lanes a little abruptly, and someone behind you honks and says, "Give me some space." That's a simple comment, but you immediately fire back. That's how it works around here, you have no idea how to drive. Why? Because your brain doesn't want to accept, even for a moment, that you were briefly careless. Accepting carelessness would feel small, even though the act itself is small. This is everyday defensiveness, small, casual, ordinary. But this small habit slowly poisons relationships too, because the other person receives a clear message. The truth doesn't matter here, only their pride does. The deeper cost of defensiveness is this uncomfortable truth. Defensiveness doesn't just distance you from other people, it distances you from your own honest self. You edit out your mistakes, highlight your intentions, and minimize your impact. Gradually, your mind turns into an internal PR department, issuing a press release for every situation. I am right, I am misunderstood, I am the victim, I am justified. When you live inside those press releases, you lose access to raw reality. Raw reality can be painful, but it's also what allows you to evolve. Defensiveness protects you from pain and from growth, too. Here's a workplace trap. I know, but... Have you ever seen someone respond to every suggestion this way? Sometimes "I know" is a genuine signal of knowledge. Other times it's a defense that really means, "Don't teach me, that would make me feel small." This kind of defensiveness kills learning. Years later, that same person wonders why they never get new opportunities. Sometimes those opportunities did come, but their ego rejected them, because opportunity implies you can improve, and defensiveness finds that idea insulting. There's also a relationship defense. I'm just like that. This line sounds like freedom, but it's actually surrender. It means I won't change, I won't reflect, you adjust. And the other person hears, your feelings are an inconvenience to me. Here, defensiveness becomes an armor of identity. You legitimize your flaws in the name of personality. But personalities aren't fixed. Patterns are flexible once you're willing to see them clearly. The purpose of this law isn't to make you stop defending yourself entirely. Sometimes defense is necessary when a real boundary has been crossed. The real insight is, don't make defensiveness your default setting. A default defense means you treat every piece of feedback, every question, every hint of discomfort as an attack. Once you see that pattern, a new quietness enters your life. You stop reacting instantly, stop proving yourself instantly, stop performing instantly, not because you're weak, but because you're secure. Loudness isn't a sign of security, openness is. Here's a scene from friendship, a real turning point. A close friend tells you, sometimes your jokes about my looks hurt my feelings. There's an immediate heat inside you, I was just joking. A defensive response is ready to fire. But you pause for a second and realize they didn't come to hurt you, they came to stay close to you. If you defended yourself, the friendship would have tightened into something smaller. Because you listened instead, the friendship deepened. Life is full of small crossroads like this, where you choose between ego and connection. Defensiveness gives you the ego. Openness gives you the connection, and connection makes you more stable in the long run. You don't need a list of techniques here, you need one honest question. Why am I defending myself right now? Because when you're defending, you're usually protecting one specific thing, your self-image. And in the process of protecting that image, you end up hiding from your real self. What real self-respect offers you instead is truth, even when that truth is a little uncomfortable. Defensiveness gives you temporary shelter, but you don't grow in shelter, you only hide there. This law reminds you that your dignity doesn't come from being perfect. Your dignity comes from your awareness. Because when you're aware, you stop letting your ego take the wheel. You're still human, you'll still defend yourself sometimes, but now you'll recognize it as it happens, and you'll recognize it with a little more grace. Episode 8. The Law of Self-Sabotage. Change your circumstances by changing your attitude. Have you ever stepped back and watched your own life like an audience member watching a movie? The same kinds of problems, the same kinds of endings, the same kinds of regrets. And you tell yourself honestly, I try. Yes, you do try, and yet some things keep breaking over and over again. Today's law touches that hidden force shaping your outlook before you even make a decision. That force isn't a villain, it's your attitude. Self-sabotage isn't loud, it's a daily whisper. What difference would it make to try? I probably won't be able to do this anyway. These people won't understand. Not now, maybe later. And then you choose whatever offers instant relief, but in the long run, that choice quietly shortens your life's possibilities. The most dangerous part of self-sabotage is that it rarely feels like sabotage while it's happening. You think you're simply being realistic, practical, careful. But sometimes it isn't realism. It's an emotional habit that, in the name of protecting you from pain, actually removes you from possibility. In its own words, self-sabotage doesn't mean you're consciously wrecking your own life. It means you're viewing the world through a fixed lens, and that lens keeps pushing you toward the same outcomes you've been stuck in before. Your attitude, your inner emotional climate shapes your words, your tone, your timing. And timing shapes life, whether it opens doors or closes them. You may believe you're a victim of circumstance, but often you're actually a co-author of those circumstances. Not because you're a bad person, because you're human. What's driving this behavior? Your mind is built for safety, not happiness, not growth, but safety. So whenever something requires innovation or stretching beyond your comfort zone, your mind perceives it as a threat. And the moment that threat registers, your mind reaches for the familiar direction. Familiar equals predictable, and predictable equals safe, even if predictable also equals painful. That's why some people repeatedly choose the same kind of relationship, repeatedly make the same career mistake, repeatedly get into the same kind of fight, and repeatedly fall into the same self-talk. The mind says, At least I know what happens here. Known pain feels safer than unknown possibility, and that's exactly where self-sabotage begins. Self-sabotage tends to take two forms. The first is prevention. You don't even start, you don't fully commit, you don't open up. The second is self-punishment. When things are going well, you unconsciously create friction because success feels unfamiliar. You mistake peace for boredom, and then you create disturbance in your own life just to feel a sense of control again. Here's a workplace scenario. I don't fit in here. You join a new team. The people are fast-paced, sharp with humor and confident. Within the first week, you start comparing yourself and your attitude quietly delivers a verdict. I'm an outsider, I'm slow, I won't be able to keep up. Notice you didn't look at the facts. You issued a verdict and then you started behaving according to that verdict. You ask fewer questions. You hold back your opinions. You stay carefully pleasant in meetings without ever showing your real presence. The result, people start describing you as quiet. They stop giving you challenging work. They underestimate you, and within months you conclude, I see I'm not growing here. This is the classic signature of self-sabotage. You turn your fears into evidence through your own behavior. The real root of the suffering here isn't the boss or the team. It's the lens that had already decided this place wasn't yours before you even gave it a chance. Here's a different workplace pattern. It has to be perfect. Some people sabotage in the opposite direction. Their internal attitude is, if it's not perfect, I'm not safe. So they procrastinate, they overthink. Research after research, draft after draft, polish after polish. From the outside, it looks like hard work. On the inside, it's fear of judgment. The deadline arrives, the project is incomplete, confidence takes a hit, and then guilt sets in. They say, I didn't have enough time. But the truth is they spent their time protecting themselves. Perfectionism isn't always about excellence. Sometimes it's hiding disguised as effort. Self-sabotage doesn't protect you from failure, it protects you from being seen. And without being seen, there's no room for growth. Here's a relationship pattern. You're falling for someone. The connection is building, they're warm, present, consistent. Then one day they're busy, their reply comes late, plans shift, perfectly normal things. But your attitude, if it's tuned toward abandonment, instantly assigns dark meaning. They're losing interest, I'm not enough, I'll be left again. Instead of showing your vulnerability directly, you start testing them. You go cold. You give one-word replies with a tone that says everything is fine while clearly signaling it isn't, wanting them to prove their care. Sometimes they chase you in panic. Sometimes they get tired of it and pull away. Then you say, I was right. But actually, your attitude was never right. Your attitude was scared, and that fear shaped behavior that starved the relationship of oxygen. The suffering here comes from not being able to fully enjoy love, because you keep demanding proof. You look for danger even in closeness, and that search for danger eventually creates real danger. Here's another pattern seen in some relationships: restlessness without drama. Some people feel uneasy in calm, steady relationships. Something feels missing, often intensity, conflict followed by reconciliation, uncertainty, jealousy, chase. Because to their nervous system, love has become synonymous with tension, so peace feels unreal. Then a small thing triggers an outsized reaction. Suspicion arises unprompted. Arguments start almost unconsciously, not because they want to be difficult, but because peace itself feels unfamiliar to them. That's self-sabotage too, destroying your own safe space because safety, paradoxically, makes you feel unsafe. Here's a social media pattern. I'm falling behind. You scroll and see someone's new car, someone's engagement, someone's viral moment, someone's transformation. A quiet thought forms, I'm behind. That thought becomes a mood. The mood becomes an identity, I am behind. And once that identity forms, your actions start shrinking. You want to start something, but you half start it. You're consistent for a week, then you drop it, and then you label yourself. I'm just not consistent. But sometimes inconsistency isn't a character trait, it's hopelessness. To a hopeless mind, effort feels like a waste, so it feels safer to quit early and avoid the heartbreak of trying. That quitting early is a shield, but a shield also blocks the results you were hoping for. Here's a money-related pattern, paying for tomorrow with today. You make a purchase, an instant hit of pleasure, and then another and another, telling yourself, just a small treat. But when the treat repeats, it stops being a treat and becomes a pattern. Sometimes it's comfort shopping, sometimes stress eating, sometimes impulsive trips. At the center of all of it sits one attitude: I need relief right now. Relief is a genuine human need, but when relief becomes your only coping mechanism, it creates financial stress, and financial stress pushes you towards seeking even more relief. The suffering here comes from blaming outside forces, prices, salaries, society, while your own internal rhythm stays hidden from you. Self-sabotage is rarely one big leap. It's usually a slow accumulation of small leaks. Here's a health-related pattern: that's just how I am. If someone asks why you're always tired, you might laugh and say, that's just my nature. But there's a difference between nature and habit. Habit just slowly starts to look like nature. Late nights, low movement, constant screen time, constant snacking, constant scrolling. Your body reports low energy, low mood, and you interpret that as, I'm just not motivated. Sometimes demotivation isn't a personality trait, it's a depleted system. And when you turn a depleted system into your identity, you start believing change is impossible. Once you accept it as impossible, you stop trying. Once you stop trying, conditions get worse, and the belief grows even stronger. This is the self-sabotage cycle. Belief creates behavior, behavior creates results, and results reinforce the original belief. Here's an uncomfortable but real piece of this puzzle. Sometimes you're not afraid of failure, sometimes you're afraid of success. Success means visibility, expectations, more eyes on you, more pressure. As you start climbing to a new level, a voice inside might whisper, if I go up, people will target me. If I become visible, I'll be exposed. If I succeed, how will I sustain it? So without fully realizing it, you make small mistakes, late replies, sloppy work, avoided meetings, missed deadlines right at the moments that matter most. Then you blame bad luck. But sometimes it isn't luck, it's a safety reflex. Failure offers a strange kind of comfort. At least expectations won't rise, at least you won't have to keep proving yourself. That's the hidden reward built into sabotage. Lower pressure, lower stakes, and unfortunately, lower self-trust too. How does ignoring this law lead to conflict and suffering? If you overlook it, you keep experiencing the same three things. You get stuck analyzing external drama instead of examining your own lens. You repeat patterns and then act surprised, as if you'd never seen this movie before. You either blame yourself excessively or blame the world excessively, and both extremes keep you stuck. The real antidote to self-sabotage isn't motivational hype, it's genuine awareness. Because when you spot your own attitude in action, you stop being a puppet to it. You'll still feel fear, but you won't let fear write the final verdict. You'll still feel insecurity, but you won't let insecurity determine your destiny. Here's a small original story: I'm always late. Imagine a friend who's late to every single plan, always with a seemingly valid excuse: traffic, calls, work, family. But the pattern keeps repeating. One day you notice he becomes anxious before he even leaves the house, imagining people will judge him, imagining the conversation will be awkward, imagining a question will come up he can't answer. So he delays. Delaying momentarily lowers his anxiety because he doesn't want to face the moment right away, but the delay increases the consequences. People get annoyed, trust erodes, and he feels shame. That shame makes him defensive next time and late again after that. This is self-sabotage. His real issue isn't punctuality, it's a fear-based lens. And this story isn't just about that one friend. In one way or another, it's about all of us. The end of this law comes down to a simple inner shift. You can ask yourself a gentle question: is what I'm perceiving reality, or is it the color my attitude is painting over reality? Don't hate the color, just notice it, because the moment you notice it, space opens up. And with that space, compulsive reactions quiet down. The true opposite of self-sabotage isn't perfection, it's presence. Presence means staying in touch with your inner climate, watching it without becoming it. Just remember this today. Your life isn't shaped primarily by your thoughts. It's shaped, more quietly and more powerfully, by your attitude, even when you're not consciously aware of it steering the wheel. Let's move to Law 9 in the next episode. The Law of Repression. Confront your dark side. Episode 9. The Law of Repression. Confront your dark side. Have you ever caught yourself saying, "I'm not like that. I never get jealous. I never get angry. I'm just a simple, easygoing person"? These lines sound clean, sound respectable, sound safe. But sometimes they're your biggest blind spot. Today's law touches an uncomfortable truth. There are parts of every person that they refuse to accept. Those parts don't disappear, they just go into hiding. And whatever gets hidden eventually leaks out, not as a confession, but as a reaction. In its own words, what does repression actually mean? It doesn't mean you're bad. It means you're a whole, complex person, and you've locked a certain part of yourself away in the basement. Who lives in that basement? The anger you suppress while trying to appear nice. The envy you deny while trying to appear supportive. The selfishness you don't admit while trying to appear generous. The hunger for attention you hide behind a low-maintenance persona. The flicker of cruelty you push down, insisting, "I could never do that." This law says you can't erase your dark side, you can only push it into your unconscious. And an unconscious dark side is the most dangerous kind, precisely because you can't see it, even as it quietly influences you. What's behind this pattern? We all tell ourselves a story about who we are, and we load our best qualities into that story: polite, loyal, hardworking, honest, caring. And any trait that would tarnish that story gets edited out. But the human mind doesn't have a delete button, it only has storage. What doesn't get processed gets stored instead. Repressed anger has energy. Repressed envy has energy. Repressed desire has energy. Repressed aggression has energy. Energy doesn't vanish, it changes direction. And the core effect of repression is that this energy leaks out through unconscious moments instead of conscious choices. Here's a workplace scenario. A colleague repeatedly interrupts you, takes credit for your work, cuts you off in meetings. You try to stay mature, you don't say anything, you smile, you let it go, telling yourself, "I'm above this." But that anger keeps making small deposits inside you. Then one day, over something completely minor, an intern mislabels a file, or a junior colleague asks a basic question, you snap. Harsh tone, sharp words, and uncomfortable silence in the room. Later, you feel ashamed and tell yourself, "I was just in a bad mood." But you weren't, you were overloaded. What did repression actually do here? It made you deliver the wrong intensity to the wrong person at the wrong time, because the energy got misdirected. You struck the wrong target, and the suffering from ignoring this pattern is that you thought you were being patient, when really you were becoming a pressure cooker, and a pressure cooker can burst on anyone at any time. Here's a relationship scenario, the "I'm chill" mask. You're in a relationship and your partner seems to be getting closer to a friend. You feel a pinch inside, jealousy, insecurity, comparison. But you tell yourself, "I'm not the possessive type, I'm chill," trying to prove to yourself how modern you are. So you deny the jealousy. But denial doesn't come with peace, it comes with suspicion. You start checking in more, watching their tone, reading micro-signals, asking casual questions that aren't really casual. Then at some random moment, a sentence just slips out. You're always paying attention to them. Your partner is shocked, becomes defensive, and a fight breaks out. You say, "I was just being honest." But the truth is, you weren't being honest earlier, you were delaying honesty. If you don't give your jealousy a safe space to exist, it creates a toxic space of its own instead. The suffering here comes from being unable to be truly genuine, and that lack of genuineness quietly created distance in the relationship, where words were exchanged, but real safety wasn't. There's also a common pattern known as nice person syndrome. Some people package their dark side under a single label: "I'm a nice person." The benefit of that image is real, people approve of you and there's less conflict. But the hidden cost is real too: weak boundaries, buried anger, denied needs. A nice person often doesn't state their needs directly, they hint, they sacrifice, and they silently keep score. When that anger is finally released, it tends to come out as a flood rather than a gradual release. That's a classic signature of repression. Outwardly sweet, inwardly stormy. The suffering from ignoring this pattern is that you turn your sweetness into a virtue while your relationships fill up with quiet tension, because people can feel that what they're getting isn't love, isn't presence, isn't a real choice, it's a performance. What exactly is the dark side this law refers to? It doesn't mean villainy. It means unowned emotions, unclaimed anger, unclaimed envy, an unclaimed craving for power, an unclaimed craving for attention, an unclaimed urge to dominate, an unclaimed urge to escape. When these parts of you go unowned, they end up owning you instead, and you justify your behavior with logic. I had to. That's just how things are. That's exactly the point of this law. If you think of yourself as an angel, you'll stay blind. If you think of yourself as human, you'll stay aware. Awareness is safety. Here's a workplace pattern: passive aggression. You don't display open anger. You stay professional, composed. But repressed anger just puts on a new costume. Cold, minimal effort replies. Okay, sure. You're punishing someone without admitting you're punishing them, and the other person feels that coldness and distance. Relationships in the office grow strained and work starts to exhaust you. You conclude, people here are toxic. Sometimes a toxic environment is genuinely real. But sometimes the toxicity is your own unexpressed emotion, quietly filling the room because you never found a way to release it directly. The suffering here is that you're causing harm while believing yourself innocent, because you weren't loud, but silence can be its own kind of weapon. There's also the "I don't care" mask. This is one of the most common forms of repression. You feel left out of a group and say, "I don't care," while feeling hurt inside. You feel overlooked by someone you like and say, "I don't care," while feeling ashamed inside. Someone else gets the promotion you wanted and you say, "I don't care," while feeling jealous inside. Sometimes "I don't care" is genuine maturity. Other times it's disconnection dressed up as calm. Disconnection might protect you in the short term, but over the long term it costs you real joy, because shutting off pain doesn't just shut off the pain, it dims the whole system. This law offers a reminder. You can't selectively numb yourself. You either feel or you go numb altogether. How does ignoring repression create conflict? It creates three major problems. You become an unpredictable version of yourself, and people find you inconsistent, so trust becomes shaky. You choose the wrong villain, projecting your inner issues onto other people, fighting battles that were never really theirs to fight, leaving the actual problem unsolved. You maintain a false identity. "I'm not that type of person." And sustaining that false identity drains your energy, leaving you fatigued, irritable, and empty. The root of the suffering isn't that you have dark feelings. The root is that you deny them. Here's a small original scene: the gym mirror moment. You're at the gym near a mirror and you notice someone else fit, confident, drawing attention. A flash of envy passes through you. Instantly, your mind reaches for an explanation. He must be on something, he's showing off, he's shallow. Maybe, maybe not. But be honest with yourself for a second. Am I jealous? Accepting jealousy might make you feel small in the moment, but denying it makes you bitter. And that bitterness eats into your time, your focus, your relationships. Accepting jealousy, ironically, cleanses you because you stop fighting yourself. That's the real power of this law. The moment you name a dark emotion, it stops being your master and becomes a signal instead. A signal, not an identity. The end of this law isn't about steps, it's about a simple shift. You stop racing to prove you're a good person, and you start seeing the real you, a person with light inside and shadow inside too. Accepting the shadow doesn't make you dangerous, it makes you conscious. Because once you see your dark side clearly, you don't act it out impulsively, you understand it, and that understanding naturally softens your reactivity. Just remember this today. What you hide inside can quietly drive you, and what you're willing to see clearly can no longer dominate you. In the next episode, we'll cover Law 10, Envy, the Fragile Ego. Episode 10, The Law of Envy, the Fragile Ego. Have you ever noticed that when someone wins, instead of feeling inspired, you feel irritated? You smile, you write congratulations. You even send an emoji, but somewhere underneath, there's a thin, burning sensation like an invisible needle pressing into your chest. You feel it and you immediately tell yourself, I'm not jealous. I'm just noticing something. I'm just being realistic. Today's law shows you exactly this. Envy isn't loud. Envy is civilized. It wears sunglasses. It speaks softly. It starts with, I'm just saying, and then it quietly bends your decisions. In its own words, envy simply means, I don't want them to have it either. It means, I feel bad because someone else has what I feel entitled to. You can recognize envy by two signatures, comparison and bitterness. Envy convinces you that life is unfair, not because life actually is unfair in that moment, but because your ego has become fragile. A fragile ego naturally tries to feel stable by wanting to see other people become a little less stable, a little lower, a little embarrassed. You don't announce this wish out loud, and sometimes you don't even admit it to yourself. But the underlying energy is the same. Why does envy arise in the first place? Your ego keeps a silent scoreboard. How far ahead am I? How far ahead are they? What level am I at? What level are they at? And when that scoreboard shows you behind, the ego feels real pain. How does the ego handle that pain? It distorts reality. It insults the other person. They have connections. They got lucky. It's all for show. They didn't earn it. Sometimes those things are partly true, but that's the pattern of envy. Truth was never your real goal. Relief was. Relief for a bruised ego. The dangerous part of envy is that it can feel sweet. It gives you a temporary sense of superiority, as if you've quietly decoded the real story behind someone's success. You look at their achievement, hunt for its flaws, and for a moment your ego breathes easier. But then the bill for envy arrives. What's the bill? You can't be fully present in your own life. You can't celebrate your own progress. You can't feel someone else's happiness cleanly. You start losing trust in relationships because you're secretly competing. Envy doesn't just distract you from your best self, it actively pulls you away from it. Here's a workplace scenario. You and a colleague are on the same team, working the same hours, putting in the same hustle. Then one day they get promoted, applause, smiles, photos in the room. You clap too, but inside a question forms. Why not me? That reaction, honestly, is natural, ambition is normal, and desire for recognition is normal. But envy begins when, instead of processing that feeling, you start focusing on the other person, scrutinizing their tone, counting their mistakes, calling their success politics, calling their effort just visibility, calling their achievement a stunt. Then you start withholding information, support, warmth. On the surface, you stay professional. Underneath, you're seething. The team's energy drops, trust weakens, your own mood turns heavy, and your performance quietly slips. Because while you're busy trying to pull someone else down, you're not busy building yourself up. This is where suffering comes from ignoring the law. When you can't process the pain of missing out on a promotion, you make jealousy your identity. And once jealousy becomes your identity, your career narrows along with it. Here's a friendship scenario. A friend suddenly changes, a new job, a new social circle, sharper style, more confidence. You want to feel happy for them, but there's a strange distance inside you. You see their posts and your mind produces a comment. They're really showing off now. Maybe there's a little showing off involved, but the real question is, why are you so triggered? Envy's real trick is that it makes you look for the reason in their behavior instead of in your own insecurity. You start getting sharper with your jokes about them. You minimize their achievements. Everyone's doing that these days. Normalizing their success eases your own discomfort of comparison, but gradually the warmth in the friendship fades. You stop sharing, distance builds, and eventually you say, they changed. Sometimes they really did change, but sometimes it's your own lens that turned bitter. The suffering here comes from losing friends simply because their growth held up a mirror to your own ego. Here's a relationship scenario. Your partner receives some social attention, compliments, direct messages, people noticing them. You say nice, but there's tension underneath. Here, envy shows up as jealousy, and at the core of jealousy is fear of being replaced. Now you start controlling your partner, not openly but steadily. You comment on their friendships, tease their clothing choices, restrict their attention toward others. You tell yourself, I'm just protecting the relationship. But actually, you're protecting your own ego, managing your own insecurities under the label of protection. The result is that your partner feels suffocated. They start hiding things, become less transparent, and you sense that shift, which fuels your insecurity even more. This is how envy slowly poisons relationships. It turns love into a competition, when love is supposed to be a source of safety, not rivalry. Here's a social media scenario: quiet resentment. You follow a creator you genuinely enjoy at first. Then they grow rapidly, brand deals, public praise, and your mood shifts. You keep scrolling, but you no longer enjoy it. You start watching like a judge. You read the comments looking for flaws. You quietly wait for their downfall. This moment might surprise you, but here's the truth about envy. Its darkest version isn't hatred, it's the quiet imagination of someone else's failure. You picture their fall, and that image gives your ego a strange sense of relief. But that relief comes at a cost. It makes your mind cynical, your heart harder, and your own creativity shrinks, because when you can't tolerate someone else's light, you end up dimming your own. Envy also wears a hidden mask. I'm just being honest. Envy rarely calls itself by its own name. It says, I'm just blunt, I just tell the truth, I just have high standards, I just get irritated by fake people. Sometimes you really are being direct. Sometimes your standards really are high. But envy reveals itself through selectivity. You're only harsh toward the people who happen to trigger you, only quick to call someone overrated when their success rattles your own internal scoreboard. That selectivity, once you're honest with yourself, exposes exactly what's going on. How does ignoring envy cost you? In 3 areas. In relationships, you wear a mask of support while your energy stays cold, and people can feel it, trust erodes, and your reputation slides toward being seen as negative or bitter. So people stop sharing their real feelings with you. In opportunities, because people naturally gravitate toward calmer, safer energy. And in inner peace, which might be the biggest loss of all, constant comparison keeps leaking your joy. And when joy leaks out, you grow more reactive, more defensive, more suspicious. Envy isn't a passing emotion, it's a climate you end up living inside. Here's a small original scene: the person who's always on top in the gym, the office, or a classroom. There's always that one person who's always praised, always noticed, always admired. At first you're impressed, then you're irritated. You tell yourself, they're just overconfident, just attention-seeking, just putting on an act. Maybe. But for a second, look inward instead. What am I actually feeling? Often the honest answer is, I feel invisible. Envy doesn't really put you against them. It puts you against your own sense of invisibility, and it dresses that feeling up as something about them. If you accept that underlying feeling instead of fighting it, you don't become bitter, you become clear. What does clarity look like? I want recognition. I want to grow. I want respect. That need isn't shameful, it's human. Envy is what happens when shame around that need turns into punishing other people for simply meeting theirs. How can you understand this more deeply? A fragile ego means your sense of self-worth isn't anchored inside you, it's anchored externally in comparison. So someone else's win can feel personal, as if their win is somehow your loss. But life isn't actually zero-sum. Attention can sometimes feel limited. Status can sometimes feel limited. But growth isn't limited, growth is unlimited. Envy puts you inside a scarcity lens: limited seats, limited respect, limited love. Inside that scarcity lens, you naturally become competitive. A competitive mind becomes defensive. A defensive mind becomes bitter, and a bitter mind becomes lonely. The end of this law isn't about forcing positivity, it's about honesty with yourself. Watching your own envy isn't humiliating, it's a form of maturity. Because when you name envy, it can no longer secretly control you. You realize, I'm not actually angry at them, I'm hurt by what I lack. I'm restless about my own potential. I'm unsure of my own identity. And once you look at that root instead of the surface, your whole nervous system softens. You start being able to tolerate other people's happiness. Someone else's win stops feeling like a threat, and you start focusing on your own path instead. Envy has an opposite, admiration. Not blind admiration, but clean admiration, where you don't collapse in the face of someone else's success and you don't grow bitter either. You simply acknowledge for a second, yes, they have something, and then you quietly reconnect with yourself. I have something too. In the next episode, Law 11, the Law of Grandiosity, Know Your Limits. Episode 11, the Law of Grandiosity, Know Your Limits. Have you ever met someone who isn't just confident but absolutely certain, the kind of certainty that leaves no room for questions, where doubt itself feels like an insult, where even reality seems to need their permission? And then after some time, that same person reaches a point where everything slips out of their hands, their team, their money, their reputation, their relationships. And you wonder, how does someone so intelligent end up here? Sometimes the enemy of intelligence isn't stupidity. The enemy of intelligence is grandiosity. Today's law shows you a subtle disease. How I can quietly turns into I can, no matter what. How confidence slowly turns into entitlement. How self-belief becomes a cover for delusion. In its own words, the law of grandiosity isn't just ordinary ego, it's internal inflation. You start to feel a little bigger and the world starts to look a little smaller. You underestimate obstacles, underestimate time, underestimate people, and most dangerously, you underestimate your own limitations. That's the heart of this law. It's normal to want to feel a little special, but when special becomes your default identity, you lose touch with reality. And that disconnection doesn't cause an instant crash. It causes overreach. And the bill for overreach always arrives later. What's behind this behavior? There's a hunger inside every human being. I matter. You build from that hunger. You learn, you push, you take risks. But when a little success arrives, a little praise, a little power, the mind reaches for a shortcut. I am the reason, I am a genius, I am the exception. That's the seed of grandiosity, and that seed rarely announces itself loudly. Often it feels sweet. You feel good, energized, unstoppable. But feeling unstoppable is not the same as actually being unstoppable. Grandiosity gives you a high, and you mistake that high for proof. Applause makes you assume you're beyond mistakes. Support makes you assume you're always right. More followers make you assume you're beyond criticism. And once you're beyond criticism, you become beyond learning. And once you're beyond learning, you start to decline. Here's a workplace scenario. You're a star performer, you deliver under pressure, clean up messes, and people begin trusting and respecting you. Slowly, an internal line forms. I run this team. At first, that line feels motivating, but eventually it turns into behavior. You hold on to credit by title, you claim decisions as your own, you resist sharing responsibility, you treat advice as interference. You consider mentoring junior colleagues a waste of time because I could just do it myself faster. The team is impressed by you, and at the same time, a little afraid of you, not because you're always right, but because you've become unpredictable. People stop challenging you. Then one day you're overloaded. Maybe you're sick for a week, mentally checked out, and suddenly the whole project wobbles. You realize the team was never really built. A hero was built instead. The cost of grandiosity is that instead of building a system, you build a throne. And a throne is fragile. This is where the suffering begins. You converted respect into dependence, and dependence eventually crushes you. Here's a founder or side hustle scenario, the illusion of the golden touch. You launch a product, it works, customers come in, revenue rises, friends are impressed. Your mind draws one conclusion: whatever I touch turns to gold. So you accelerate, too many features, too many markets, too many promises. You pivot, expand, pivot again. You start spending more time on announcements than on actual work because announcements are easy dopamine. Internally, high-maintenance behavior creeps in. Then reality catches up. Support tickets pile up, cash burns faster, the team gets exhausted, customers churn away. And you're shocked, why doesn't anyone understand? What is grandiosity doing here? It stops you from respecting the user, stops you from listening to the market, and makes you treat constraints as an insult. But constraints aren't insults, constraints are truth. The suffering from ignoring this law comes from mistaking growth for a personal trait, when growth is actually an ecosystem. Timing, People, context, discipline, and patience all play a role. Here's a social media scenario, the I am the brand trap. Your following grows, your opinions get engagement, your jokes go viral. It's inspiring at first, but then you start placing yourself on a pedestal thinking, whatever I say, people will accept it. Whatever I do, people will approve. Then you post something insensitive or careless or a lazy claim. People react, criticism follows. A healthy response would be, maybe I missed something. A grandiose response is, everyone's a hater, everyone's jealous, the public is dumb. You stop learning. You start viewing your audience with contempt. You defend your own bubble. In the short term, you protect your ego. In the long term, you lose your credibility. Grandiosity doesn't make you more famous here, it isolates you. Because the moment you refuse to accept criticism is exactly the moment you start losing touch with reality. Grandiosity doesn't only appear in careers, it shows up in relationships too, as a silent form of superiority. You're in a relationship and you believe you're more mature, more rational, more together than your partner. You label their emotional needs drama. You label their fears immature. You label their boundaries overthinking. You think you're guiding them, but underneath you're making them feel small. At first they adjust, then they withdraw, then they stop sharing. Then they stop trying and you wonder, I supported you so much, why don't you appreciate it? Grandiosity's blind spot is mistaking respect for a lecture, mistaking care for correction. The suffering here comes from mistaking connection for control and never even realizing it, because you were so focused on being right that you never noticed you were losing closeness. A common pattern of grandiosity is overpromising. The grandiose mind loves a cinematic future, big gestures, big words. Next month, everything changes. Next year, we'll be at the top. I'll handle it all. The words carry sweetness and confidence, but the details, time, trade-offs, limits are missing. That's why grandiose people often overcommit, and overcommitting leads to underdelivering, which leads to excuses, which leads to blame, which leads to conflict, and then the whole cycle repeats. The suffering from ignoring this law is that you see yourself as a visionary while, in fact, you're eroding trust. And once trust cracks, it can't be repaired with the next promise. Trust requires consistency, and grandiosity finds consistency boring. There's a hidden cousin of grandiosity too. I'm a victim, therefore I'm special. Grandiosity doesn't always say I'm the greatest. Sometimes it says I've suffered the most. You crown your own struggle and use it as your identity. Then you feel entitled to extra consideration. The rules should be different for me because I'm already hurt. The pain can be real. The past can be heavy. But when pain gives you a sense of entitlement, you become unfair. And unfairness creates distance, which leads to more hurt, which reinforces the entitled loop. The suffering here is finding sympathy without connection, because sympathy is temporary and connection requires reciprocity. There's a quiet, everyday sign of grandiosity. You start seeing constraints as disrespectful, sleep as a waste, health as a burden, team processes as unnecessary bureaucracy, negative feedback as an attack. You think the rules apply to average people, but you're the exception, and that mindset quietly makes you reckless. Reckless in decisions, reckless in your words, reckless in relationships because you assume you'll always bounce back. Sometimes you do until you don't. And when you don't bounce back, grandiosity's next move is blame. The client was stupid, the partner was ungrateful, the team was incompetent, the world was unfair. Blame protects the ego, but it doesn't protect your life. Watch how one small success can change your tone. Imagine you win an award, a big prize, a major victory. That day, your voice becomes a little different, a little louder, a little less inclined to listen, a little quicker to interrupt. You might not even notice, but other people do. They admire you, and at the same time, a subtle distance opens up. They no longer feel equal to you. That micro-distance quietly weakens their future support. Grandiosity can cost you allies without a single loud confrontation. The suffering from ignoring this law is assuming people must be jealous, when sometimes people aren't jealous at all. Sometimes they're simply tired of your sense of superiority. What shifts once you understand this law? The point isn't to lecture you, the point is to offer a mirror toward groundedness. Groundedness doesn't mean denying your strengths. You are strong, you are capable, but you're not invincible. Once you accept that, your energy clears. You enjoy applause without drowning in it. You celebrate success without making it your identity. You use power without worshiping it, and that clean energy is what allows you to build something that lasts. Grandiosity builds rockets in the short term. Groundedness builds engines for the long term. You don't need a whole toolkit of techniques here, you just need one internal signal. The moment you catch yourself thinking, "I'm beyond criticism, I understand everything, I'm the exception, the rules are for other people," treat that thought as a quiet warning sign. Because that's exactly the moment you start negotiating with reality, and reality doesn't negotiate. The fall that comes from grandiosity is rarely dramatic at first. It starts quietly. A little less listening, a little less learning, a little less patience, weaker alliances, bigger blind spots, until it isn't quiet anymore. Just remember this today. The bigger you become, the more you need to stay grounded. If you stay grounded as you rise, you'll stay up there too. In the next episode, Law 12, Gender Rigidity, Bring Both Poles Back into Yourself. Episode 12, The Law of Gender Rigidity, Bring Both Poles Back into Yourself. Have you ever noticed that some people seem very strong, but being around them feels heavy, while other people seem very soft, but making real decisions with them feels difficult? In both cases, the same thing is missing: balance. Today's law reveals a quiet rigidity when a person locks themselves into a single fixed role, as if life were one long costume party and they've decided that a single costume is their whole identity. That's just how I am. I'm just like that. People like me don't act that way. In our family, we don't do things like that. Men don't cry like that. Women shouldn't demand things like that. These lines feel normal because they're common in society, but common doesn't always mean healthy. In this law's own words, gender rigidity doesn't mean you stop having both assertive and receptive qualities. It means that when you focus on only one side, you amplify that side and effectively forbid the other one. You compress your own natural range, and your personality narrows down to a single note. It might be loud, but it's limited. Don't confuse masculine and feminine here with bodies in this law. They represent two psychological languages, two poles within every human being. One pole is action, assertion, boundaries, and direction. The other pole is receptivity, sensitivity, intuition, and connection. Both are essential parts of being human. Rigidity is when you decide, "I'm only action," or "I'm only sensitivity," and then run your entire life on that single script, even in situations that call for the opposite quality. The point of this law is simple. When you accept both sides of yourself, you become more real. And being real makes you more effective, more attractive, and more stable. What drives this behavior? The root of rigidity is often fear. Fear of being judged, fear of appearing weak, fear of being too much, fear of rejection. Society trains you from very early on to display one side and hide the other. So you start editing yourself. If softness feels unsafe to you, you become hard. If assertiveness feels unsafe to you, you become overly accommodating. In both cases, you think you're protecting your nature, but in the name of protection, you're actually cutting off part of your own range. And when your range is cut, you become predictable. The benefit of predictability is comfort of identity. The cost of predictability is that you can't adapt, and the people who tend to thrive in life aren't always the toughest. Often, they're the most adaptable. Gender rigidity damages exactly that adaptability. That's why some people dominate every single conflict, while others disappear from every single conflict. An overdose of one side starves the other. Here's a workplace scenario, the emotionless leader mask. You're a team lead at the office and you've decided that a leader's job is results, not feelings. You reduce every discussion to numbers. When someone mentions burnout, you say, "No excuses." When someone offers feedback, you say, "You're too sensitive." On the outside, you look strong. On the inside, you become disconnected. The team fears you but doesn't trust you. Gradually, people stop telling you the truth. They hide problems. They stop sharing risks. They stop bringing new ideas. You get confused. Why doesn't my team show more initiative? Sometimes the reason isn't laziness. The reason is a lack of safety. Rigidity here treats strength as pure hardness and leadership as pure control. But leadership also requires receptivity. Listening, reading emotional cues, sensing timing. When you starve that side of yourself, you lose results too. Here's the reverse pattern, just a nice professional trap. Imagine you decide, I won't be tough, I'll just be sweet to everyone. You don't set boundaries, you avoid saying no. You stay quiet on matters of credit. You avoid conflict, you delay difficult conversations. On the outside, you're easygoing. On the inside, you're drained. People love you, but they mistake your kindness for permission, and work piles up on your desk. They respect you, but they don't follow you, and you tell yourself, I'm just unlucky. Sometimes it's not luck, it's rigidity. You've labeled assertion as rude, and in doing so, you've distanced yourself from your own agency. Here's a relationship scenario. I don't feel anything. Your partner says, I need more emotional closeness with you. You feel uncomfortable because you've decided that showing emotion is weakness. So you express feelings through jokes instead, change the subject, or turn everything into a practical discussion. Your partner starts to feel, I'm the only one doing this. You tell yourself, I'm loyal and loyalty matters, but emotional availability matters too. Rigidity can make love feel dry. You care, but you can't express it, and without expression, caring becomes invisible. The result is misunderstanding, distance, and eventually loneliness on both sides, because you've outlawed softness within yourself. Here's the mirror version in relationships. You might need affirmation, clarity, or consistency, but you've decided that expressing needs directly is unattractive, that you're supposed to appear strong. So instead of asking directly, you give hints. You go silent, hoping they'll pick up on it. Your partner isn't a mind reader, so they miss the signal. Then you feel hurt, you withdraw, they get confused, and a fight breaks out. What's the rigidity here? You've made directness feel like shame, so you can't communicate plainly, and love without directness only increases guesswork. Guesswork increases anxiety. Social media adds pressure of its own to maintain a persona. Some people feel they must appear always dominant, always unbothered, and others feel they must appear always agreeable, always supportive. Both personas eventually exhaust the person wearing them, because you're a human being, not a poster. Rigidity here turns you into a performer, and while performing, you become disconnected from your actual inner state, which often leads to sudden breakdowns, random anger, or unexpected numbness. In daily family life, you're often told, whether you're a man or a woman, just adjust. So you stay quiet, you swallow your needs, you shrink your choices to fit in. Years later, you might feel like a guest in your own life, carrying responsibilities, but not real agency. That kind of drama doesn't happen overnight. It builds from small, daily acts of self-suppression. How does ignoring this law lead to conflict and suffering? Two kinds of damage tend to occur. Internal damage. You end up fighting yourself, judging your own feelings, labeling your own wants as wrong. That inner war stays silent, but it consumes your energy. External damage. You misread other people, you mistake softness for manipulation, firmness for cruelty, sensitivity for drama, and boundaries for ego. Misreading leads to unnecessary conflict. Conflict leads to distance, and distance leads to bitterness. Rigidity gives you simple, tidy categories: strong or weak, tough or soft, right or wrong, but human nature doesn't come in categories. It comes in a spectrum. When you deny the spectrum, you're forced into extremes, and extremes aren't attractive in the long run, they're unstable. Hardness without any warmth feels inhuman. Softness alone can't hold structure. Life needs both warmth and structure. Tenderness in relationships alongside real boundaries, empathy at work alongside genuine assertiveness. Just remember this today. Your real power doesn't live in hardness alone. Your real power lives in flexibility. In the next episode, we'll explore Law 13, the law of aimlessness, move forward with a sense of purpose. Episode 13. The Law of Aimlessness, move forward with a sense of purpose. Have you ever looked at your own life and felt like everything is moving but nothing is actually going anywhere? You wake up, work, texts, calls, deadlines, dinner, a bit of scrolling, sleep, and then the next day the same thing again. Without warning, a question rises up inside you. Where am I actually going? Today's law leads you straight to the root of that question: aimlessness. Aimlessness doesn't mean you're lazy, it means you're busy without direction. And sometimes being busy is the most dangerous kind of distraction of all, because when you're busy, you believe you're making progress, when really, you might just be moving in circles. In its own words, aimlessness is a quiet drift. You run your life on default settings. Whatever is urgent decides what matters. Whatever is loud decides what matters. Trends decide what matters. Other people's expectations decide what matters. And you simply react. This is the center of this law. Purpose doesn't give you speed, purpose gives you direction. Without direction, speed just becomes fatigue. You work hard without knowing what kind of person that work is shaping you into. You make choices without knowing what shape those choices are giving to your life. The pain of hopelessness is immediate and obvious. The pain of aimlessness is slow. And the biggest danger of slow pain is that you start treating it as normal. What's driving this behavior? Choosing a direction comes with real pressure, because choosing a direction means saying no to other things, disappointing some people, and sometimes disappointing your own past self-image. So the mind often chooses safety instead. Drift. In drift, if something goes wrong, you can say, "It just happened." If you fail while drifting, you can say, "I wasn't even really trying." Aimlessness is sometimes protection from the fear of choosing wrong, the fear of committing, the fear of being ordinary, the fear of losing options. The illusion of endless options is appealing. "I could do anything" sounds powerful, but when you don't actually choose anything eventually becomes nothing, and that's the quiet tragedy of aimlessness. You lose meaning while trying to protect your own sense of freedom. Here's a career scenario. I'm only doing this for the money. You're at a job with a decent salary, a manageable team, manageable work, and yet there's an emptiness inside. You tell yourself, "The money's coming in, what else do I need?" Money genuinely matters, but you're human, not just a bank account. Money provides survival, purpose provides oxygen. When purpose runs thin, small things start breaking you. The tone of an email upsets you. Being left out of a meeting makes you bitter. A small setback leaves you feeling hopeless, because you don't have a clear why holding you steady. In aimlessness, your motivation depends on external rewards, raises, titles, praise, and when those rewards slow down, you collapse. This is where suffering comes from ignoring the law. You start experiencing work as a punishment, and once work starts feeling like punishment, a huge portion of your waking hours turns into a kind of prison. Here's a hustle trap scenario. Instead of committing to becoming anything specific, you start multiple things at once: a course, a side hustle, a gym plan, a content idea, a networking push. Week 1, energy is high. Week 2, fatigue sets in. Week 3, guilt arrives. You say, "I'm just not disciplined." But sometimes the issue isn't discipline, it's direction. Aimlessness hands you random goals. Random goals give you random dopamine, and random dopamine gives you addictive busyness. You end up doing a lot but building very little, because building requires a line, a through line, and aimlessness scatters you across too many directions. A scattered mind believes it's exploring, but a scattered mind is often actually escaping from deep work, from discomfort, from real identity questions. The suffering here is that you look productive but don't feel fulfilled, and without fulfillment, productivity turns into noise. Here's a relationship scenario. We're just passing the time. You're with someone, there's comfort, company, laughter, but no real clarity. You both avoid talking about the future. You both avoid asking, "Where is this going?" You avoid boundaries, avoid setting expectations. Why? Because clarity demands decisions, and decisions demand risk, so you both choose to drift instead. Then one day, a small disagreement turns into a real fight, And it's not actually about the small thing, it's the built-up pressure of unresolved confusion. Aimlessness in a relationship creates an emotional tax. Because you're unsure, you become hypervigilant. You read signs, analyze tone, treat availability as proof of love, mistake jealousy for evidence. The relationship swings on again, off again, hot and cold. The suffering from ignoring this law is that you can't fully enjoy love because you're living in constant uncertainty. And running from that uncertainty often feels heavier than a clean breakup would, since you're carrying that ambiguity every single day. Social media adds its own layer here because purpose doesn't come prepackaged online. You see someone's morning routine, someone's intense grind mentality, someone's manifestation ritual, someone's soft life aesthetic, someone's discipline challenge, and you feel inspired. Then you copy it. Copying itself isn't the problem, blind copying is the problem. This is the modern version of aimlessness, borrowing the meaning of your life from an algorithm. What does the algorithm show you? Whatever is engaging, whatever is extreme, whatever is visually appealing. Then you start feeling inferior about your own quieter life. You label your own natural pace as slow, your genuine preferences as weak. The suffering from ignoring this law is that you turn your real nature into a source of shame, and what you consider shameful, you can't build anything meaningful from. The seed of genuine purpose already lives inside you, but aimlessness sends you searching everywhere else, and you end up exhausted. Here's a city life scenario: overstimulation and the loss of inner quiet. You're constantly surrounded by traffic, noise, deadlines, and screens. Your mind is constantly stimulated, and the side effect of that stimulation is that you lose the ability to hear your own inner signals: boredom, curiosity, restlessness, quiet excitement, discomfort. These signals are actually telling you which direction you're aligned with and which direction you're drifting away from. But when you fill every single moment with music, reels, and chats, you drown those signals out. That's aimlessness at work. Noise keeps you occupied, and occupation keeps you unaware. The suffering from ignoring this law is that you gradually stop being the author of your own life. You become a passenger instead. One symptom of aimlessness is impulsive reinvention. In aimlessness, you sometimes make dramatic changes, sudden thoughts of quitting, sudden fantasies about relocating to a new city, sudden relationship exits, sudden personality makeovers. Sometimes these changes are genuinely necessary, but reinvention born of aimlessness happens without any real inner clarity. It's an escape without a foundation. You change your location, but your mind stays the same. You change jobs, but the pattern repeats. You change partners, but your patterns of relating remain the same. Then you wonder, why does this keep happening to me? This law shows you that when you don't define your direction, you end up romanticizing drift instead, and drift can take you to new places, but rarely to a genuinely new version of yourself, unless you bring awareness along with you. Here's a small original scene: the heavy quiet of a Sunday evening. Imagine it's Sunday evening. You relaxed all day, but as evening approaches, a heaviness sets in. You pick up your phone, videos, memes, chats, but the heaviness never lifts, it just gets damp and dull instead. What's the source of that heaviness? Often it's the quiet realization: I'm about to repeat this same week again. Repetition itself isn't the problem, meaningless repetition is. Repetition with purpose feels sacred, like you're building something. Repetition without purpose feels like you're just serving time. The suffering from ignoring this law is that you call your heaviness laziness, when really it's meaning hunger. There's also a link between aimlessness and an addiction to office politics or status games. When your sense of purpose is weak, you get overly invested in external drama: who got invited, who got praised, who got ignored. You think you're being smart, but often you're actually distracted. Purpose is what anchors you. Status is volatile, and that's exactly why chasing it makes your mood volatile and your sense of self-worth volatile too. The suffering from ignoring this law is that you chase respect but lose inner respect, because you yourself no longer know what you stand for. Aimlessness in a relationship often produces mixed signals and a slow erosion of trust. In aimless relationships, clear conversations get postponed, hard questions get postponed, boundaries stay blurry. Then small issues start creeping in, late replies become normal, small lies become normal, half commitments become normal, because when the destination is unclear, the discipline of the journey loosens too. And then one day a breakup happens and people say, "That was so sudden." Usually it wasn't sudden at all, it was a slow erosion of meaning. The suffering from ignoring this law is that you turn love into a source of doubt, when really you were afraid of clarity all along. The purpose this law points toward isn't meant to turn you into a robot. Purpose means your yes becomes selective and your no becomes clean. When you have real clarity, you stop jumping at every opportunity, stop shifting with every bit of validation, stop collapsing with every piece of criticism, because your identity isn't anchored in daily reactions anymore. It's anchored in a deeper line. I'm moving in this direction. And when that direction is real, you can absorb far more of life's chaos. Setbacks will still happen, delays will still happen, but you won't take them as personal insults. You'll see them as part of the journey. In aimlessness, every setback becomes an identity crisis. With purpose, a setback simply becomes a data point. The end of this law isn't a checklist, it's an inner recognition. You didn't come here just to fix your life. You came here to express yourself. Aimlessness turns you into a mechanic, constantly repairing. Purpose turns you into an artist, creating, building, refining. An artist's job isn't to be perfect. An artist's job is to be honest. Just remember this today. When you have no purpose, everything distracts you. When you have purpose, your attention naturally gathers around what matters, and quiet, focused attention becomes strength. In the next episode, let's move to Law 14. Conformity, resist the downward pull of the group. Episode 14. The Law of Conformity, resist the downward pull of the group. Today's law is about resisting the downward pull of the group. That phrase sounds simple, but it holds a dark truth inside it. Sometimes your downfall doesn't come from your own weakness, it comes from your company. Imagine yourself alone, you're a fairly decent person. You have your limits, you feel empathy, you know how to hold yourself back. But then you step into a group, and suddenly that internal stop signal gets muted. You say things you wouldn't normally say. You laugh at things that would normally make you uncomfortable. You go along with things you'd normally step back from. And then, once you're alone again, that group version of yourself starts to feel strange. That's the downward pull, the gravity of the group. It doesn't argue you into agreement. It simply pulls you along. In its own words, this law doesn't say groups are inherently bad. It says group comfort can sometimes become more important to us than our own conscience. And when comfort takes priority, we slowly start adjusting our own standards. Not because we're evil, but because we want to belong. Wanting to belong is completely normal. But if belonging requires bargaining away your best self, the group isn't just holding you, it's owning you. Psychology gives us a useful frame here. The concept of groupthink describes how the pressure for harmony and consensus inside a group can suppress critical thinking and lead to worse decisions than individuals would make on their own. The concept of deindividuation describes the sense of anonymity people feel inside a crowd. Personal responsibility can drop, and people sometimes engage in behavior they'd never consider doing alone. And diffusion of responsibility describes how, when more people are present, each individual assumes someone else will act, so the odds of anyone actually stepping up go down. Together, these three forces create a kind of atmosphere where your I fades and we gets louder. And then you justify it to yourself. Everyone was doing it. I wasn't the only one. Why overthink it? But that why overthink it quietly chips away at your character piece by piece, and often day by day. Here's a workplace scenario: casual cruelty. It's lunch break and there's a work group chat. Someone snaps an unflattering photo of a colleague. Then the memes start, then the jokes, then the nicknames. Just kidding. You pause for 10 seconds and think, that's a little harsh. Then you send a reaction emoji anyway, then a follow-up line just to keep the vibe going, and you get instant reward for it. Laughing reactions. Haha, savage. You feel the warmth of belonging. The person the jokes are about isn't in the room, and so the guilt isn't in the room either. That's what the downward pull does. It creates distance. Distance dulls empathy, and dulled empathy normalizes cruelty. Here's a friend circle scenario where just like that. Some friends mimic a stranger's accent. Some comment on someone's body. Some are dismissive toward a server at a restaurant. You'd never be that casually disrespectful alone. But in the group, you smile along because you're afraid that looking uncomfortable will make you seem boring, and that fear can feel worse than being wrong. Notice the group's language too. Relax, you're overreacting. Oh, this is just how the world is. These aren't just throwaway lines, they're permission slips. Permission to become smaller, permission to compromise. Here's another pattern: college or hostile traditions and hazing culture. It's tradition, it happened to all of us, so you'll go through it too, and eventually you'll pass it on. This loop repeats across generations. You embarrass a newcomer without fully admitting that you're indirectly avenging your own past embarrassment. What the group tells you is that this makes you tough. In reality, it makes you desensitized, and then insensitivity gets rebranded as strength, and sensitivity gets rebranded as weakness. This is one of the most dangerous lies of the downward pull, because in reality, softness is human, and softness paired with backbone might be the best combination of all. Here's a modern scenario: online mobs and instant certainty. A trending clip appears, a headline with half the context attached, and the crowd in the comments starts moving in unison. Destroy him, expose him, cancel him. You start typing along too, not because you actually know the full story, but because you want to be on the right side. The downward pull of the crowd speeds up here. Fast outrage feels like morality, but fast outrage is often just an emotional flood standing in for actual thought. When you move with the crowd, you feel strong, but often you're just being carried. Here's a risky decision scenario. Everyone in a group is investing, there's hype about the next big thing, and someone says, "You're late, I already put money in." You put your doubts aside because the group's confidence feels reassuring, you feel less alone. But when consequences eventually arrive, the group scatters. You're responsible for your own decisions, bro. Suddenly, everyone becomes an individual again. This is the pattern of the downward pull. The pressure is shared, but the cost is yours alone. So what does resist actually mean here? It doesn't mean fighting every group, and it doesn't mean becoming rigid and detached. It means staying present within the group, keeping your awareness alive, because the very first thing that dies inside a group is awareness. Awareness means asking yourself in real time, what am I becoming right now? Is my version with this group kinder, braver, more honest, or crueler, more careless, more performative? This is a diagnosis, not a judgment. You're simply checking the pulse of your own character. Here's another hidden truth. The downward pull of a group often settles at the lowest common value, because maintaining high standards takes effort, maintaining boundaries takes patience, and holding people accountable takes courage. Groups often crave ease instead, and choosing ease costs you depth. Picture this: you're in a car with 3 friends and the driver's going a bit too fast. Someone says, "Go faster, make it fun." A tightness forms in your stomach, but you smile anyway, not wanting to break the vibe. This moment feels small, but small moments like this shape a life, because each one quietly decides whether you'll follow your own inner signal or the crowd's momentum. The downward pull doesn't make you reckless overnight. It teaches you small compromises, one at a time. Ignore your inner signal once, then twice, then it becomes your default. And eventually you tell yourself, "I'm just like this." No, you're trending with the group, not simply being yourself. The real, usable shift here isn't a set of tactics, it's a perspective. Stop treating belonging as oxygen. Belonging is only genuinely oxygen when it lets you breathe freely. If you're becoming safe by filtering out your real words, becoming cool by hiding your real values, becoming easy by swallowing your discomfort, you're not truly belonging there. You're quietly disappearing there instead. And another important shift: stop villainizing the crowd. Think of the crowd like the weather. Weather doesn't force you to do anything. It just influences you. So learn from your own inner awareness the way you'd learn to bring a jacket for changing conditions. The most mature form of resistance often isn't loud rebellion. Sometimes the only form of resistance you need is an internal pause, a 1-second gap where you notice, this is what we're doing. It's not what I'm choosing. And once you notice that, you automatically feel a little freer because the spell of unconscious participation breaks. Something interesting happens when you stop blindly following the crowd's flow. Your presence acts like a mirror for the group. Sometimes the group softens in response. Sometimes the group labels you different. Either way, the truth becomes visible, and truth is often costly, but it's clean. Remember this, the group doesn't intentionally pull you downward. The group is simply protecting its own comfort, and in protecting that comfort, it can also make you addicted to comfort. But the purpose of your life isn't just to belong, it's to become someone. Today, just remember, I'm not merely part of the group, I am also the voice of my own conscience. And you don't need a dramatic speech every time the crowd starts pulling you down. Sometimes it's enough to say quietly inside yourself, I can be with you, but I can't lose myself. Episode 15. The law of fickleness make them want to follow you. Have you ever watched a crowd suddenly become certain the moment one particular person speaks, as if that person's confidence instantly dissolves their own doubts, as if someone else's certainty hypnotizes away their confusion? And then, sometime later, that same crowd, the same people, turns against that same person. Yesterday's leader becomes today's disappointment and tomorrow's problem. Today's law reveals this shifting nature. Its name is fickleness. Fickleness simply means people are not stable. Their moods change, their loyalties shift, their opinions move like the wind, following pressure and direction. And the deeper truth in this law is this: people don't follow you because you're the best. They follow you because you create a particular feeling inside them. In its own words, fickleness doesn't mean everyone is bad. It means people, especially in groups, are led by emotion more than by pure logic. Individually, people can appear rational. In a crowd, people tend to become more emotional. Crowds crave clarity. Crowds crave direction. They want a face to look toward so they can set their own uncertainty down for a moment. Sometimes a crowd puts you on a pedestal, only to knock you off it later. Why? Because they're not really placing you on a pedestal, they're placing their own needs there. A need for certainty, a need for hope, a need for protection, a need for belonging. And when that underlying need shifts, their loyalty shifts along with it. What's really behind human behavior here? There's a small, childlike part in all of us that wants someone to step forward and say, I'll take care of it. Choices are overwhelming. Risks are real, so people unconsciously reach for a shortcut. Let someone else lead. The appeal of a leader isn't that they're flawless, it's that they seem capable, seem clear, seem present. People don't want to carry the full weight of reality alone. They want to share that weight. And when you make people feel, I'm here for you, they feel relief, and relief leads to admiration. Admiration leads to loyalty. But if the foundation of that loyalty is relief, then the loyalty is fragile because relief is temporary. As soon as stress returns, people go looking for a new source of certainty, a new face, a new hero, a new voice. Understanding fickleness teaches you something important. Don't idealize the crowd and don't build your foundation on the crowd's mood. Here's a workplace scenario, a new manager's honeymoon period. A new manager joins your office. In the first week, they're friendly, they listen closely, they celebrate small wins. The team says, wow, what a supportive boss. By the second month, deadlines tight, pressure rises, and the manager starts making tough calls, saying no to some requests, giving direct feedback on others. The team's mood flips instantly. The boss has changed. The boss is toxic. The boss is on a power trip. Or maybe reality is simply setting in. What does fickleness reveal here? People tend to like you as long as you're providing comfort. The moment you demonstrate real accountability, discomfort appears. And how do people typically handle discomfort? They blame whoever caused it. You might wonder, I'm the same person, why are they acting like this? This law offers you an important insight. This kind of group affection was never unconditional, it was always conditional. That awareness doesn't make you cynical, it makes you stable. Here's another scenario: yesterday's team star. An employee delivers under every crisis, becomes the example everyone points to, and then one quarter their performance dips: burnout, family issues, whatever the reason. Suddenly whispers start. Overhyped, honestly. Not that smart, just got lucky. The same people who admired them now pull away because pride, too, is a social game. As long as you're on the winning side, people warm up to your glow. The moment you stumble, people quietly protect their own status by distancing themselves. The painful part of fickleness is that people often respond more to your current position than to your actual capability. If you ignore this law, you'll end up in one of two extremes, either worshiping the crowd or resenting the crowd. Both extremes make you blind. Here's a friend group scenario: the fun supplier leader role. In a friend group, there's often one person who makes the plans, brings the jokes, brings the energy, organizes the outings. The group loves them because they keep supplying the vibe. Then a phase comes where they get busy, stop planning, feel a little low. The group's warmth shifts and a new, fun supplier naturally emerges. The old leader feels replaced, feels hurt. But this is the inside truth of the law. Sometimes people aren't following you for who you are, they're following you for what you provide. When the supply stops, the attention shifts. That truth can sound harsh, but it also carries real power. Once you understand it, you stop locking yourself into a role, and you free yourself from the pressure of always being the fun supplier. You start building genuine presence in friendships instead of a performance. Here's a modern scenario: the mood swings of a social media audience. You post content online. One week you go viral and people call you so relatable, the best. The next week, you're slightly off on a topic and people call it cringe. Then you don't post for a few days and the audience's tone shifts. They've lost their edge, not the same anymore. The digital version of fickleness is even more intense because online audiences don't see your face. They only see the content, and reactions online are cheap and instant. If you ignore this law, you tie your nervous system to the audience's mood, and you stop creating, you start chasing instead. Chasing approval, chasing engagement, chasing trends. And where does chasing end? Exhaustion, followed by bitterness, followed by quiet resentment toward the very audience you were trying to please. This law's real message is: understand the crowd, but don't build your identity from it. How does fickleness create conflict? When you don't understand it, you carry 3 unrealistic expectations. Permanent gratitude: you assume people will always remember what you did for them, but sometimes they simply won't, not out of malice, but because attention is short. Stable loyalty: you assume loyalty is fixed, but people move according to their own interests, fears, and sense of belonging. Today you make them feel safe, tomorrow someone else might. Pure rationality: you assume that once you've provided proof, everyone will simply understand, but emotion moves crowds far more powerfully than proof ever does. When these expectations get shattered, you build anger, become controlling, and start punishing people with silence, sarcasm, and withdrawal. And eventually you become someone people quietly start to avoid. Understanding fickleness pulls you out of this loop, because you stop taking it as a personal insult and start recognizing it as ordinary crowd psychology. What does make them want to follow you really mean? It doesn't mean manipulation. It means that people follow you when a genuine feeling of trust builds inside them. And trust builds when you're predictable in your values, when you avoid hypocrisy under pressure, and when you don't dismiss their emotions. People won't follow your ideas if you make them feel small. They won't follow your plans if you make them feel disposable. This can be your anchor in a world defined by fickleness. Don't chase the crowd, chase consistency. Consistency can look boring on the surface, but it's what builds credibility, and credibility is what keeps you stable amid everyone else's shifting moods. Picture a tense town hall meeting, a big announcement, maybe a restructuring. The room is nervous, the questions are sharp. If the leader on stage becomes defensive, starts blaming others, or overpromises, the room's trust collapses, people mentally check out. But if the leader stays calm, avoids drama, offers a clear and honest breath of realism, even when the news itself is difficult, people feel like at least someone is steady enough to hold the moment. That's the real source of followership. Not perfect answers, but stable presence. The antidote to fickleness isn't controlling the crowd, it's controlling yourself. Today, you can hold on to one quiet truth. Other people's moods are not your responsibility. Your responsibility is your own character. Fickleness teaches you this. Don't get intoxicated by admiration, and don't get shattered by rejection, because both are temporary. Your real work is to build steadiness within yourself, a place where you don't inflate with praise and don't collapse under criticism. In the next episode, we'll explore Law 16, Aggression, how to read the hostility behind a friendly facade. Episode 16, The Hostility Behind a Friendly Facade. This law doesn't just make you aware, it wakes you up. Because in real life, the deepest damage is often done not through open hostility, but through sweetness. Have you ever felt this? Someone speaks to you very politely, and yet after they leave, your mood sours. They never said anything directly hurtful, yet something inside you deflates. That's the real trick of a friendly facade. Soft words, sharp impact. A friendly facade doesn't mean every smile is fake. It means that sometimes friendliness becomes a cover for inner resistance, hidden jealousy, or quiet contempt. Open hostility, at least, is honest in its own way. But when hostility wears a mask of friendliness, you start to doubt your own instincts. Psychologists describe passive-aggressive behavior as expressing negative feelings indirectly instead of addressing them openly. And that's exactly what a backhanded compliment is. A remark that sounds like praise but could just as easily be an insult. So what you're experiencing isn't necessarily overthinking. Sometimes you're simply receiving mixed signals, warm packaging, cold intent underneath. The most dangerous part of a friendly facade is that it makes you feel guilty for even noticing it. You start telling yourself, they were being nice, I must be the negative one, the overly sensitive one, the one causing an issue. And so you suppress your own clarity in order to protect their image. Hostility hiding behind friendliness usually leaks out in three places: tone, timing, and pattern. Tone, sweet words but a subtle undertone of superiority. Timing, a joke, dropped right at your most vulnerable moment. Pattern, every single time you rise, that same person seems to find a way to pull you back down a notch. A single instance might prove nothing on its own, but repeated small cuts quietly erode your confidence over time. Here's a common scenario, the slow poison of the backhanded compliment. You achieve something, a new job, a move to a new city, a personal glow-up, a new relationship, whatever it might be. Someone reacts, "Wow, nice, you're so lucky. Honestly, I didn't think you'd be able to pull this off. Good for you, let's see if you can actually sustain it though." The praise sits at the front of the sentence, the doubt sits at the end. And what does that doubt do? It quietly discounts your win in your own mind. You start celebrating with a defensive edge already in place. Hostility isn't loud here, it's strategic, meant to shake your confidence just enough that you can't stand fully upright, because a person standing tall is harder to control. Here's the "I'm just being honest" scenario. There's often a friend who drops truth bombs at every gathering, comments about your outfit, your partner, your body, your choices. And the instant you seem uncomfortable, they claim the moral high ground. "I'm just being real. I say it because I care. You just can't handle it, that's your problem." This isn't actually honesty. This is dominance wrapped in niceness. Real honesty leaves an aftertaste of clarity. This kind of honesty leaves an aftertaste of shame, and shame doesn't improve you. Shame shrinks you, and a shrunken version of you becomes convenient for the other person. Here's a workplace scenario, support that quietly sabotages. A colleague publicly praises you with big words and a big smile, star performer, dependable, a total rock star. But behind the scenes, they dilute your credit, put a spotlight on your small mistakes, quietly repeat your idea in a different meeting as if it were their own. Warmth on the surface, resistance underneath. You start rationalizing, maybe I'm imagining this, maybe I'm being too sensitive. But your goal here isn't to prove that someone is definitively hostile. Their goal is to exhaust you mentally, so you keep fighting your own perception instead of addressing them directly. When hostility is open, you can sense the boundary clearly. When hostility hides behind friendliness, the boundary turns to fog, and in fog, you lose direction. Here's a family or close circle scenario, sweet control. An older relative says, "I'm just speaking up for your own good," followed by comparisons, judgment. What will people think? This isn't always hatred, sometimes it's fear, sometimes tradition, sometimes a need to preserve their own authority. But the effect is the same. Your sense of freedom shrinks. You start filtering your decisions through their permission, and when you disagree, it triggers a reaction. You've changed. I only say this because I care. What did I even say that was so wrong? The real difference between care and control isn't found in the tone, it's found in the impact. Care makes you stronger. Control makes you dependent. Hostility hidden behind friendliness often shares a common root: envy. Envy doesn't necessarily mean someone wants to steal your life. It means your progress creates a quiet discomfort inside them. And when a person can't tolerate that discomfort, they usually do one of two things: openly express frustration, or subtly make you feel smaller so their own discomfort eases. A subtle way to notice this, without turning into a detective, is paying attention to relief versus tension. Genuine friendliness leaves you feeling relieved. You can exhale around that person. Hostility disguised as friendliness leaves you feeling tense, like you're performing. Notice if you find yourself measuring your words around a particular person. Do you downplay your own success so it doesn't feel awkward? Do you suppress your excitement? If the answer is often yes, you already know, because their friendliness comes with conditions. Here's a small original scene: soft smile, sharp sentence. Imagine sitting at a cafe having easy small talk. Someone asks about your life, seems genuinely invested. You mention you're starting a new project. They lean in, smile, and say, "Nice, just one thing, you're kind of emotionally soft. Will you be able to handle the pressure?" "I'm just saying this because I care." That line sounds like concern, but something in you sinks, because the question wasn't meant to support you, it was meant to seed doubt. And doubt is one of the biggest energy drains there is. The mechanics of a facade are simple. It doesn't attack you directly. It makes you hesitate. Hesitation slows you down. Slowness makes you late. Lateness makes you miss opportunities. And missing opportunities makes you blame yourself cleanly without ever tracing it back to where the doubt actually started. The point of this law isn't to turn every sweet person into a suspect. The point is, don't treat a sweet tone as proof of good intent. The real proof is the pattern. The proof is consistency. And the proof is the feeling you carry with you after you leave someone's company. Do you feel expanded, or do you feel folded inward? Sometimes your body decodes it before your mind does. That slight tightness in your throat, that awkward laugh, that urge to justify yourself. The impulse to explain yourself doesn't always come from guilt. Sometimes it comes from the fog of subtle manipulation. And one signature of manipulation is that you keep explaining your reality while the other person keeps acting completely innocent. Here's a real-life shift you can practice. Don't mistake hostility for the presence of an enemy. Think of hostility as information. Information about where you feel safe, where you don't. Information about who's genuinely comfortable with your growth and who only likes a smaller version of you. And once you see this pattern clearly, you can decide: I'll stay kind, but I won't stay blind. I'll respect people, but I won't erase myself to keep the peace. Here's a deeper truth: real care sets you free. Fake care manages you. Real care gives you clarity. Fake care gives you confusion, and confusion is the cage, while the friendly facade is simply the lock. Recognizing a friendly facade doesn't make you cold, it makes you clear. A clear mind doesn't hand its worth over to a random tone of voice. A clear heart can still stay soft without becoming available for casual harm. Just remember this today. In places where you repeatedly feel small, the problem isn't always your sensitivity. Sometimes there's a hidden hostility breathing quietly behind someone's smile. You can bring warmth into your relationships without dimming your own light. Because the most expensive kind of betrayal isn't loud, it's polite. Episode 17. The Law of Generational Myopia. See the historical moment. Sometimes it feels like the world has suddenly become strange. People seem more impatient, attention spans seem shorter, trust feels more fragile, career paths feel more confusing. And you might ask yourself, am I the one who's slow, or is this generation just different? Then you listen to someone older say, kids these days. And you hear someone younger say, older people just don't get it. Same complaint, different direction. And eventually you realize we all quietly treat our own era as the baseline of normal, and everything else as some kind of glitch. Today's law explains that you're not just the product of your individual choices, you're also shaped by the particular era you happen to live in. Your speed, your fears, your ambitions, even your style of loving are all shaped by the winds of your specific time. Seeing that wind clearly is how you break free of generational myopia. And to see it clearly, you have to learn to recognize your own historical moment. In its own words, generational myopia doesn't simply mean you're biased. It means you carry an invisible lens that quietly defines what feels normal and what feels abnormal. The world you grew up in trained your mind on what's safe, what's risky, what's respectable, what's a waste of time, what's real, and what's nonsense. The trouble starts when you mistake that training for universal truth. You say, that's just how things are. What you're really saying is, that's how I've experienced it. Every generation is really just one chapter. Myopia gives you the illusion that your chapter is the entire book. And when you believe your chapter is the whole book, you tend to do one of two things: fight against change or get completely swept away by it. Both extremes leave you weaker. Seeing the historical moment means recognizing the direction of your era without worshiping it, recognizing its biases without shame, and then running your life from perspective, not from pure reaction. How does your era actually shape you? Not through words, but through atmosphere. If you grew up witnessing instability, you might make security your religion. If you grew up witnessing scarcity, you might make saving money central to your identity. If you grew up witnessing chaos, you might mistake control for love. If you grew up immersed in praise culture, you might mistake validation for oxygen. None of this is a moral judgment, it's just psychology. What felt dangerous during your parents' era might feel completely normal in yours, and what feels unthinkable in your era might have been completely ordinary in theirs. Conflicts often arise in exactly this gap, but opportunities also hide in that same gap. Because when you understand it, you become something rare, a bridge. And being a bridge doesn't mean pleasing everyone. It means being able to read a situation without becoming possessed by it. Here's where generational myopia often shows up. Imagine your workplace. A senior colleague says loyalty means personal sacrifice for the company. A junior colleague says loyalty means healthy boundaries. Both feel completely right within their own context, and both can become blind if taken as universal law. In the seniors' era, job security was rare, so sacrifice became a virtue. In the juniors' era, burnout is far more visible, so boundaries have become the virtue instead. If you only look through the senior lens, you'll label the younger generation lazy. If you only look through the junior lens, you'll label the older generation toxic. Labels are easy, perspective is hard. This law elevates you above the labels. You start seeing this less as a personal character clash and more as a clash between two different eras. And once you see it as an era clash, you stop taking it personally, which makes your own decisions clearer. Here's another scene, the myth of the safe path in careers. Sometimes you're advised, just get a stable job, aim for a government position, stick to the fixed path. Where does this advice usually come from? Often from an era when stability was rare, so stability became synonymous with success. In your own era, though, the meaning of stability may be shifting, industries evolve quickly, skills can have short shelf lives, global competition is often higher. This doesn't mean stability is useless, it just means stability might need redefining. Stability doesn't have to be a job title anymore. It can be your adaptability, your learning speed, your emotional regulation. Generational myopia here either pushes you to chase only stability or only risk. Wisdom builds a hybrid, grounded but flexible. Here's a scene about relationships and the tension between commitment and freedom. The older lens often says commitment is the default expectation. The younger lens often says freedom is the default expectation. Misunderstandings follow. The older side thinks, no one takes anything seriously anymore. The younger side thinks, that's just old-fashioned control. But the truth is that today's options are simply far more visible than they used to be. More visibility creates more comparison. More comparison creates more doubt. More doubt makes commitment feel harder to reach. In the past, options were less visible, so commitment felt socially easier to arrive at. The gift of this law is that it lets you step out of the moral argument and into the contextual one. You stop thinking people have changed for the worse and start recognizing that the world itself has changed. And understanding that makes you more realistic in relationships, not cynical, because you stop demonizing anyone and start seeing genuine patterns instead. Here's a scene about social media and the attention economy across generations. Do you ever feel like your focus is slipping? Your patience is thinner, deep work feels harder, self-control feels weaker. You might blame yourself entirely, but this law offers you another layer. You live in an era engineered specifically around capturing attention. Your elder's environment may have moved slowly. Yours moves loudly and quickly. If you don't understand that context, you'll label yourself broken, and that broken label just makes you feel even more powerless. If you do understand the context, you start seeing yourself as human under a specific kind of pressure, and by seeing yourself that way, you stop taking every reaction so personally. That's the real pain of generational myopia, mistaking the pressures of your era for a personal character flaw. This law helps you factor context back into the equation. Here's a family dinner table scene. An uncle says, "There was more respect in our time." A cousin replies, "Respect has to be earned." The uncle interprets this as arrogance. The cousin interprets the uncle's comment as controlling. Both get triggered because both are defending their own definition of normal, and an attack on that definition can feel like a personal attack. What does this law reveal here? Go into the roots of the argument, not just the words on the surface. The uncle's root value might be hierarchy equals safety. The cousin's root value might be autonomy equals safety. If you pick only one side, you'll end up half blind. If you can see both roots, you get the full picture, and the full picture doesn't make you a saint, but it does make you noticeably less reactive. There's also the illusion that this moment will never come back, a sense that every generation feels like it's living through a uniquely defining crisis. Sometimes that's genuinely true, but myopia can make you mistake your present moment for the end of the world. Then you tend to swing between two extremes, total panic or total numbness, and both states leave you passive. Seeing the historical moment means replacing panic with calm observation. You notice your era without collapsing into it, because collapsing is the easy response. Observing is the mature one. You might be wondering what seizing the historical moment actually means. It's not some hustle culture slogan, and it's not about controlling anything. Seizing it means aligning with it. When you truly understand your era, you stop expecting yourself to think or act like someone from decades ago, and you also stop blindly assuming you should behave exactly like the trendiest voice of today. You position yourself realistically. You notice what's becoming outdated, what's becoming genuinely valuable, what's superficial noise, and what's a deep, lasting shift. Watching this closely doesn't turn you into a fortune teller. It turns you into a present-day reader, and present-day readers are rare because most people stay comfortable inside their own generation's editing room, cutting reality down to fit a familiar story. Generational myopia is that editor mode. Historical awareness is reader mode. Every generation carries its own blind spot, and there are two worth naming here. The first blind spot is the comfort of believing I'm right. Every generation develops its own sense of values and can slip into quiet superiority. Older generations might think, we were disciplined. Younger generations might think, we are authentic. Discipline without empathy can curdle into cruelty. Authenticity without self-control can curdle into chaos. This law protects you from both extremes. You stop turning your particular era's values into absolute virtues. And once your ego drops that assumption, real listening can begin. The second blind spot is the "I can do anything" fantasy. Younger eras are often more hyped on possibility. Anyone can become anything. Inspiration is good, but fantasy detached from reality is dangerous, because reality still has limits, time, energy, trade-offs. Older eras, meanwhile, can overhype limitation. People like us don't do that. Safety-mindedness is good, but excessive limitation is also dangerous. Wisdom means accepting real possibility while also accepting real cost, accepting genuine limits without turning them into a cage. Here's a small original scene. A local train platform, same station, different era. Imagine standing on a crowded platform. The train arrives, people rush to climb aboard. Two voices argue inside your head. One voice, shaped by an older lens, says, "Just adjust, that's life." Another voice, shaped by a newer lens, says, "I deserve better than this." Both voices genuinely belong to you. You carry threads from more than one generation inside yourself. Myopia happens when you accept one voice completely and reject the other outright. Awareness happens when you listen to both and then consciously choose. And choosing is freedom, because in that moment you realize, I'm not just a passenger on this train. I'm not just part of this crowd. I'm not just a product of my particular era. I'm also an observer. Being an observer doesn't mean being detached. It means being a little less hypnotized. Today, you can hold onto one simple line. I will understand my era so that I don't become a prisoner of it. Generational myopia tends to set people against each other, young versus old, new versus traditional, online versus offline, hustle versus balance. Historical awareness lifts you above that fray. You put your energy toward alignment instead of argument, and the quietest sign of that alignment is that your decisions start coming from truth rather than trend, a truth that lives inside you and extends beyond your particular era. Your time will shape you, that's unavoidable. But you always retain a choice. Will you remain unconscious of it, or will you become aware? That brings us to episode 18. The law of death denial. Meditate on our common mortality. Today's law asks you to meditate on our shared mortality, and inside that title hides a strange truth. You avoid thinking about death, but that avoidance quietly shapes your entire life. You think you're simply managing your time. In reality, you're often imagining time as an endless hallway where you can always turn left or right later, as if there's always a guaranteed room waiting for you further down the line. Then occasionally a piece of news arrives, someone's final message on their phone, an obituary post, a sudden silence from someone you know, and in that moment you wake up. You see clearly that life is fragile. A few days later, though, you slip back into your old rhythm, same pace, same noise, same scrolling, same postponing. That's death denial, not the loud kind, the daily kind. In its own words, death denial doesn't mean you don't believe in death. You do believe in it, you simply behave as if it doesn't apply to you. You treat someone else's mortality as an isolated event, and you treat your own as a distant concept. The event shakes you. The concept entertains you at a comfortable distance. And when mortality stays only a concept, your priorities blur. You postpone the real decisions. You postpone the important conversations. You avoid your real feelings. You keep yourself busy, but within that busyness, you quietly drift. What's really behind human behavior here? Your mind is built for survival, not for confronting difficult truths, so it treats the thought of death as dangerous and plays a trick on you. Not now, not now. Not now doesn't mean never, but it functions as until I'm forced to. In that quiet bargain, you spend your life a little bit at a time, in exchange for temporary relief from anxiety. The root of death denial is fear, fear of losing control, fear of feeling insignificant, fear of being forgotten. And because you feel that lack of control at the deepest level, you overcompensate by trying to control smaller things instead: tone, respect, image, outcomes. You get worked up over minor things because it gives you a sense of power. Mortality reminds you that you're not actually all-powerful. It reminds you that you're limited, and being limited isn't an insult. It's simply part of being human. Once you truly accept that, something strange happens. you become freer. Here's a workplace scenario. I'll get to it later. How many times have you told yourself this? Work now, live later, hustle now, travel later, grind now, rest later. You divide your life into two phases. Phase 1 is struggle, phase 2 is actually living. The problem is, phase 2 is never guaranteed. And even when phase 2 does arrive, your nervous system may have forgotten how to simply live, because for years you practiced only urgency. A chase every day, a target every day, pressure every day. Then one day you're finally free and strangely, you can't quite find your footing. This is the workplace version of death denial. You turn your present into collateral for a future that might never fully arrive, and sometimes that loan simply doesn't get approved. Here's a relationship scenario. I'll say sorry later. A small argument, a minor ego clash, both of you thinking I'm right. You assume you'll patch it up eventually. You assume time will repair it. But time doesn't repair things on its own, time reveals them. If you don't reconnect, distance reveals itself. If you don't soften, hardness reveals itself. If you don't express appreciation, neglect reveals itself. And one day you realize relationships don't usually end with a loud breakup. They often end through quiet, repeated postponement. Death denial gives you this illusion. We have time. Until one day you don't. This isn't meant to make you harsh, it's meant to make you tender, because the real enemy of tenderness isn't hate, it's delay. Here's a scenario about parents, elders, and a missed call. You see a missed call from your mom or dad. You think, I'm in a meeting right now, there's traffic, I'm not really in the mood, I'll call tonight. Then you get tired at night. The same thing happens the next day. Eventually you call back and the voice sounds the same, just a little slower, a little quieter, a little less energetic. You brush past it because it's uncomfortable to sit with. Change tends to remind us of mortality. Death denial here doesn't just make you busy, it makes you avoidant. And avoidance eventually leaves behind the weight of regret. And the most brutal part of regret is often the thought, I wish I had been fully present in that moment. Here's a health-related scenario, the body's quiet countdown. The body doesn't just act up randomly, it sends signals. Fatigue, aches, shortness of breath, disrupted sleep, mood swings. You push those signals away, telling yourself, that's normal, I'm still young, I'm still strong, I'm just busy. This is the health version of death denial. You treat your body like a machine you'll service later, but a body isn't a machine. It's more like a relationship, and relationships tend to complain when they're neglected. You truly understand this the day you suddenly feel like a guest in your own body, and that's unsettling because a guest doesn't have control. Here's a social media scenario, the era of visibility as currency. Being seen online has become its own kind of currency, likes, views, shares, followers. Some people enjoy that currency in a healthy way, others chase it compulsively. That chase often traces back to something simple. I want to matter. Wanting to matter is completely normal. But when the only proof of mattering becomes public attention, it turns into a distraction. You become restless, afraid of silence, because silence quietly reminds you that you could become invisible. And invisibility is psychologically the younger cousin of mortality. So you generate noise instead, content, opinions, hot takes, proof, performance. And the irony is that you get so busy performing that you forget to actually live. Performance is never a real substitute for presence. Here's an interesting side effect of death denial, small conflicts turning into full-blown wars. Have you ever noticed how cruel people can become over minor things? A disagreement, a comment, a small correction, suddenly escalating into a full character assault. Why? Because when someone is uncomfortable with their own quiet awareness of mortality, they often inflate their ego instead. The shortcut to that inflation is winning arguments, winning through sarcasm, winning through dominance, winning through humiliation. It gives a brief high. Then comes emptiness, because that kind of high never delivers real meaning, only alignment with your deeper values does. That's the real gift of mortality awareness. It lifts you above petty battles, not through sudden perfection, but through a simple realization of where you're actually wasting your time. That awareness doesn't sharpen you into someone harsher. it softens you and channels your energy toward what actually matters. Here's an original scene, a train platform and the instinct to go first. Imagine standing on a crowded platform, the crowd pushing forward, everyone wanting to board first. Someone bumps your shoulder and your ego flares. You want to push back to prove you're not weak. Then a second later, you notice an elderly person struggling nearby, a child crying, someone's bag has fallen. That second offers you two choices: the automatic response of ego or the human response of awareness. Death denial pushes you toward the automatic response. Mortality awareness wakes you up to the human one. Awake people aren't perfect, but their decisions tend to be cleaner. Here's another original scene, a wedding hall on one side, a quiet funeral on the other. Picture two neighboring spaces. One side, a wedding, lights, music, photography, food, celebration. The other side, a funeral, silence, white sheets, slow steps, heavy eyes. Both spaces are actually delivering the same underlying message in different tones. Time is passing. A wedding says, celebrate. A funeral says, don't waste this. Death denial turns a wedding into pure escapism. Mortality awareness turns a wedding into gratitude and presence. Death denial turns a funeral into something to avoid entirely. Mortality awareness turns a funeral into clarity and alignment. The point of this law isn't to make you sad. The point is to keep you awake. How does ignoring this law create suffering? It typically sends you into 4 patterns. Postponed living. You set important things aside for later, and sometimes later turns out to be empty. An inflated ego. You chase control and dominance because deep down you feel powerless, and you rush decisions as a way to outrun that feeling. Misplaced priorities. You turn small battles into major ones and treat major relationships with only minor attention. And dampened emotions. You disconnect from feeling in order to keep fear at bay. But along with numbing the fear, you also dull your capacity for joy. The real path to suffering here isn't death itself, it's denial. What shifts once you truly understand this law? A kind of simplicity settles inside you. You start instantly recognizing who matters and what's genuinely worth your time. Your yes carries real weight. Your no becomes clean. You catch jealousy faster because you recognize it as a leak of your time. You catch anger faster because you recognize it as a leak of your energy. You catch procrastination faster because you recognize it as a leak of your life. And this recognition doesn't come from technique, it comes from awareness. The end result of that awareness is that you stop paying tribute to unnecessary noise inside you. You stop trying to prove yourself, and you start actually living as yourself. You don't have to turn mortality into a dark, heavy thought. You can turn it into a clear lens instead. What does that lens give you? Presence. You start treating today as a genuine gift. You act on the things you've been postponing: gratitude, apologies, honesty. You develop humility, realizing you're both special and ordinary at the same time, and being ordinary isn't an insult, it's simply shared humanity. You find peace, letting go of the illusion of control because you understand that life was never meant to be dominated. Life can be danced with instead. Just remember this today. Denying death doesn't make you safe. Denial simply makes you absent, and while you're absent, your life keeps moving forward without you. Now you've looked into a long mirror, the mirror of human nature. And in this mirror, you didn't see that people are bad. You saw that people carry complexes, and so do you. You notice that sometimes you react and then justify the reaction with, "I was just being honest." You notice that sometimes you crave attention and then hide that need behind sarcasm. You notice that sometimes you wear a mask and then mistake that mask for your actual identity. You notice that sometimes you repeat old patterns, then act surprised when the same outcome shows up again. You notice that sometimes you dissolve into a crowd, then explain it away as just adjusting. You notice that sometimes you feel envy, and then perfume that envy with moral language. You notice that sometimes you become grandiose, and then treat limits as disrespectful. You notice that sometimes you miss hidden hostility, because smiling back feels safer. And finally, you look directly at mortality, not as a threat, and not merely as an abstract truth. What effect does that kind of truth actually have? Truth doesn't make you dramatic, truth makes you direct. Being direct means you stop postponing your life. You stop delaying your love. You stop putting your health on hold. You stop dismissing your own anger. You stop letting your ego sit on the throne. The greatest gift of awareness isn't advice. Advice gives you a 2-day motivational push. Awareness gives you a lifelong shift, a shift of lens. And the day you see your own lens clearly is the day it stops silently controlling you. You'll still feel emotions, but you won't hand them the driver's seat. You'll still have desires, ambitions, but you won't turn desire into a religion, and you won't let ambition replace your sense of self-worth. And that's exactly where a deeper shift happens. You stop trying to control life and you start trying to understand it instead. Control makes you tight. Understanding makes you grounded. A tight person gets hurt easily. A grounded person can get hurt but doesn't break. A tight person takes everything personally. A grounded person sees patterns, both in themselves and in others, and stops looking for proof in every single moment that I am right, I am important, I am enough. A grounded person carries a much quieter sentence instead, I am human. And I am human doesn't make you lazy, it makes you honest. Honest means you accept your own shadow, you accept your envy, you accept your fear, you accept your aggression. Accepting isn't the same as surrendering, accepting is visibility. And whatever becomes visible tends to stop ambushing you. Less surprise means less drama. Less drama means fewer regrets. Your life going forward will contain the same noises, the same city sounds, the same office, the same emails, the same family dynamics, the same relationship triggers, the same social media pull. This journey won't remove all of that, but it will help you read it more clearly, and the effect of that clarity will be quiet. Your reactions will slow down by a second. Your tone will soften by a shade. Your decisions will become one step clearer, 1 second, one shade, one step. From the outside, that looks small. On the inside, it's a genuine revolution, because the biggest moments in your life are built from countless smaller ones. You can now carry a different kind of confidence, not the loud kind, but a quiet one. Quiet confidence means, I believe in myself, I observe myself, I recognize my own patterns, I respect my own triggers, and I don't deny my own mortality. And when you stop denying your mortality, you naturally start respecting your time. Respecting your time doesn't mean being productive every single minute. It means being genuinely committed to how you spend it. You stop leaving your love to accident. You stop leaving your health to accident. You stop leaving your apologies to accident. You stop leaving your gratitude to accident. From here on, you may still make mistakes. You may still feel jealous, still get defensive, still procrastinate sometimes. But the difference will be this. You won't turn your mistakes into your identity anymore. You won't turn your emotions into your destiny anymore. You'll simply notice them, and noticing brings you back. Back to yourself, back to center, back to your own clarity, back to your own humanity. And once you come back to that place, you naturally understand something simple. The point of life was never perfect control. The point of life was never a flawless image. The point of life was never endless winning. The point of life is presence. With presence, you feel even the smallest moments. You feel other people more fully. You feel yourself more fully. And to truly feel, that's what it means to truly live. This has been The Laws of Human Nature, brought to you by Wayyal. Thank you for listening.